Chapter 1007. There was not a single strand of hair on the person's body, and his gaze was calm. This was a man with purple skin and a yellow cloak. The most eye-catching thing was that there was a dent on his forehead, as if the gem that was supposed to be there had never existed. Thea recognized him. This was Vision, the original owner of the soul gem. Now that the gem had disappeared, he was still standing here. There must be a complicated story behind this. Although the gem had disappeared, she could still feel some unusual energy. Vision's body still had the remnants of the soul gem, and the gem's remnant was integrated with his life. In the face of Thea's prying, the remnant had been desperately resisting, constantly emitting invisible ripples, trying to confuse her gaze. Thea smiled slightly and looked away. Walking with Vision was a woman in a red trench coat, with shoulder-length hair and a beautiful appearance. However, the energy in her body was violent and primitive, with a destructive aura, like a huge volcano. The characteristics were very obvious. This was Scarlet Witch. Both of them were strong. In her opinion, Vision was similar to the Martian Hunter. Scarlet Witch's current strength was similar to Zatanna's, but her potential was very deep. As long as she developed steadily, it would not be a problem for her to reach the multilevel in the future. That remnant aura is the Infinity Stone kept by the Universal Presbyterian Church, right? She asked Jiao Tianzuan in her consciousness. Yes, I didn't expect the Soul Gem's aura to be here. Hey, you know a lot. Have you been here before? Jiao Tianzuan answered casually, then suddenly realized that something was wrong and frowned. Didn't I teleport wrongly once before? At that time, I saw a lot of things in the timeline. She quickly fooled Jiao Tianzuan, and also set up an ambush for the future prophet. She stopped probing them. Scarlet Witch and Iron Man did not find any clues, only Vision looked around strangely. I don't mean to offend, but are there only 3 righteous people here? Superman asked. Just as he finished speaking, a muscular man wearing a red cloak and carrying a hammer flew in from afar. As he walked, he said, "Tony, why did you call me?" Jiao Tianzuan. The muscular man was shocked. He raised his hammer and was about to rush over. A group of people, mainly the double couplet, stopped Thor, who was still impulsive and brainless. This was a good thing about heroes of justice. They did not hold grudges, especially when they knew that they had to face a super enemy together. Thor also let go of the bullying he suffered in the arena. He angrily shifted his gaze away from this old acquaintance and then saw Thea beside Jiao Tianzuan. Young Mistress's casual clothes made her stand out from the rest of the heroes in strange outfits. Thor was the second to see her. At first glance, he didn't recognize him. At second glance, that's right, at second glance, he was blinded in one eye. Why are you here? He held the newly forged hammer tightly, afraid that she would grab it again. Haha. Long time no see. How's the lightning experience I gave you? You look like you've found your own path. Thea waved her hand as if she saw an old friend. Thor thought of the lightning power he learned when he was beaten up by Hela on the ground. He hummed and moved on. You forged another hammer? Are you the god of hammer? Thea asked curiously. Yeah, I forged it in the dwarf tribe. Thor had a strange look on his face. Am I that close to you? Pa. A soft sound interrupted their conversation. Thea and the others followed the sound and looked over. They saw a strange person in red and blue tights with a spider pattern on his chest lying on the window looking at them carefully and curiously. Does such a young hero have to join the battle here? Superman asked curiously. Iron Man looked awkward. He's called Spider-Man. He should be passing by. I'll go ask. After saying that, he left a smile that he thought was appropriate and quickly went outside to talk to Little Spider. Once a naughty child got serious, even 1,000 elephants couldn't pull him back. Little Spider was such a person. It was useless to explain. Tony could only pull him in and introduce him to everyone. The few of them standing in the hall was a little eye-catching. The staff in the Avengers were whispering to each other. Tony felt that he had a lot of helpers around him, so he quickly took off his armor and controlled it to fly away. At this time, among the group of strange clothes, only he and Thea were dressed normally. As they entered the meeting room, More and more the Avenger came. Hawkeye, Black Widow, Hulk, Ant-Man, War Machine, Black Panther. A golden wave lit up, and the thin Doctor Strange also came out of the portal. He first looked at Jiao Tianzuan, and then at Thea and the others. The last to arrive was a middle-aged man. He looked a little tired and had a beard. He was wearing a black combat suit with a 5-point star on his chest. He looked ordinary, but the Avenger respected him. Even if Tony had a big conflict with him, he didn't show it in front of outsiders. This was Captain America. Captain America was the soul of the Avenger Alliance. Even if he had retired to the second line, his reputation and moral character still played an influence. Like Tony, he also didn't put the conflict between them in this kind of situation. The two of them discussed in a low voice. Thea and the others were also discussing. In the end, it was decided that Thea would tell the whole story, and the righteous and good-looking person would take second place. The two sides briefly introduced themselves, and Thea began to speak in a clear voice. Kalona, an ancient race scientist from our world. His curiosity is endless, and now he is preparing to solve the mystery of the world's creation. Seeing that most of them were confused, Thea knew that she was too vague. She stretched out her hand and quickly turned into countless golden lines, simulating the phantom of two universes. She was dressed as a city beauty, but she only showed one hand, and it shocked the group of the Avenger. Seeing this familiar movement and energy wave, the Avenger turned to look at Doctor Strange. The thin middle-aged man asked with some surprise, "Why did you use our Kamatage technique? Were you once a mage as well?" Thea laughed. "Mage? I'm not a mage for a long time. I'm just borrowing your technique. But the magic in your world is a bit strange. It seems to be deliberately suppressing the power of magic. Forget it, let's talk about the current situation. Kalona is trying to merge our two worlds. There should be a lot of abnormalities in your world. According to my estimation, the rules of the two worlds are completely different. The possibility of a forced fusion is very high. This is the purpose of our visit. Find Kalona and concentrate all our forces to stop him." A mad scientist. Captain America didn't fully understand the previous words about the explosion of the universe, but he understood that the scientist wanted to cause trouble. Chapter 1008. Thea smiled bitterly. "You can't use common sense to judge them. Kalona is the oldest race in our universe, similar to your Universal Presbyterian Church. They have great combat power, and of course, the most terrifying thing about them is their scientific level, which has reached the limit of technology." Seeing that they didn't take it seriously, Thea threw out a bombshell. "I've been to your universe, right? Thor can prove that Kalona is stronger than me, even stronger than all of us combined." They saw that Thor's face was purple and didn't say a word, so they knew that this was true. They couldn't help but have a new understanding of Thea in casual clothes. Tony operated his personal terminal and checked the world. Sure enough, there were abnormal occurrences, which made him believe Thea's words a little more. A big boss came from another world to cause trouble, and they had to participate in the battle. To be honest, the double couplet had different opinions internally. However, the heroes of justice still had the basic awareness, and they all expressed their willingness to participate in the battle. Jiao Tianzuan gave a few coordinates, all of which were places where Kalona had stayed before. The double couplet asked Star-Lord's Guardian of the Galaxy to investigate. "Let's go and search too. After all, this has more to do with us," Thea whispered to Superman and the others. After that, they proposed to search. The double couplet also had to discuss this matter internally. "Can you survive in space?" Tony asked a slightly sharp question. It turned out that they could. Even Batman could travel freely in space with the yellow light ring. Tony's interest was piqued. "How are you going? Are those coordinates very far from Earth?" Thea smiled and opened a portal. This was her modified version of Marvel's teleportation. As long as they were in the universe, they could be teleported there. Iron Man laughed and put on his armor again. He said that he and Vision would also go with them. Thor thought about it and also said that he would go with them. Leaving the American team to unify the internal thinking of the double couplet, The few of them who had space survival ability went to the universe to search. After a long time, there was no progress in the investigation. Colonna's whereabouts were still a mystery. He shouldn't be here. At least I haven't seen any powerful guys around here. The slightly plump Star-Lord connected to Iron Man remotely through the communicator. While searching, Thea was also trying her best to adapt to the rules of this world. The death of this world was resisting her, so she could only take a step back and rely on the first light ring to communicate with the emotions here. Here, green represented anger, blue represented the power of space instead of hope, and yellow represented the soul instead of fear. All kinds of complicated emotional energy were disrupted and rearranged. Fortunately, all the operations were done on the ring, which saved Thea a lot of effort. Are you telling the truth or not? Diana angrily grabbed Gao Tianzuan. She had already noticed that there was something wrong with this guy's strength. He was also not telling the truth. Gao Tianzuan stammered, unable to speak. Thea pulled Diana back. This guy is just a projection. I thought it was to make it easier to travel between the two worlds, but now it seems that his real body has most likely. To be honest, the double couplet could not provide much help. She originally had hope for Gao Tianzuan, but now that one of the two main forces was dead, she was the only one left in the face of a strong enemy. She was not in a good mood. Nonsense, I'm only heavily injured. Heavily injured, do you understand? Gao Tianzuan, will not die. He argued angrily. Thea shook her head, refusing to comment. The chances of winning were not high to begin with. At this moment, Gao Tianzuan could only be treated like a mascot, waving flags and shouting battle cries. Fortunately, she had been through a lot over the years. She was no longer the newbie who had to hide whenever she saw Solomon Grundy. She closed her eyes and pondered for a while. Colonna should be in a spatial barrier. That's the fusion point of the two worlds. After saying that, a large amount of emotional energy began to gather. Countless emotional threads appeared on her skin. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and more colors appeared faintly. Countless emotions gathered together and burst forth with a color that could not be described with words. At this moment, Thea was like an upgraded version of a first light that could freely control energy. Emotional energy had directionality. The 7 lantern beasts were like shining lamps in her eyes, showing her the direction. It was less than 70% of her peak state, and this kind of emotional energy came and went quickly. It was not good for a long battle. She had to use the current surge of emotions to find Colonna. She looked around and quickly found a gap. She said to everyone, "I'll open the door. After that, no matter the result of the battle, we only have 3 minutes to fight. Star-Lord, help me keep an eye on this Gao Tianzuan. Don't let him run away." Iron Man wanted to say, "We haven't finished mobilizing yet. Aren't you guys a little too impatient?" Before he could finish his words, he saw Sia's hands grabbing the void. Her jade-white fingers seemed to be holding a door, and colorful colors flowed between her fingers. As she exerted her strength, a more gorgeous world was revealed little by little. Before Iron Man could say anything, the Righteous Alliance flew in. Thor, who had always been at the front, followed in without saying anything. Even Vision flew in. Helplessly, Star-Lord led the Guardian of the Galaxy and Gao Tianzuan and smiled at each other. Iron Man said a few words and rushed in with this group of impatient people. The space was not big. It was independent of time. It was a chaotic and illusory world. Iron Man's eyes were quickly attracted by a behemoth. It was a huge humanoid creature hundreds of meters tall. It looked simple and heavy, as if time could not hurt it at all. However, such a great creation was now like a pile of garbage quietly standing in the space. "Who is this? Or what is it?" Iron Man asked Thor beside him. In his impression, Thor had been traveling the world for many years and was more knowledgeable. Thor actually did not know who it was. He was thinking about how to get away with it. Thea had flown far away. Her voice came from afar. "This is one of the 5 gods of creation in your world, the planet Devourer. Now that he is dead, the enemy is in front. Hurry up and catch up. Are the people of their world a bunch of barbarians?" Don't they talk about tactics? This kind of suicidal charge made Iron Man very uncomfortable. He could not help but complain to Vision. On the contrary, Thor beside him liked this style of fighting very much. He shouted and rushed forward for Asgard. Thea rushed at the front. The planet devourer glanced at her and did not look at her anymore. This guy fed on planets. His strength fluctuated too much. Being full and being hungry were two completely different concepts. Killing Star Swallowing did not prove anything. She wanted to see what level Colonna was at now so that she could make a follow-up plan. Chapter 1009. Thea said that she was in a hurry, and Star Swallowing had to be put aside. As for whether or not the Iron Man would see Star Swallowing's appearance, she would go home and design the anti-Star Swallowing armor in advance. She didn't care. Outside the Star Swallowing's lifeless head, she saw Colonna. The Seven Lights beast was completely absorbed into his body, but this was only a part of his power. Colonna left the DC world, and his height returned to normal. At this time, he was 2 meters tall, wearing a high-tech armor, with a very distinctive mustache. His eyes were red and filled with endless fanaticism. Colonna, how dare you steal my light beast? If I had known this would happen, I would have cut your body into pieces. Thea was full of anger. This guy must be killed this time. Ha, new god. In my eyes, you are just a little girl who doesn't know anything. Do you know the mystery of the birth of the universe? Do you know that there was a surge of energy in the beginning that created everything today? You don't know anything. You are all slaves to power. You only know how to take like bacteria, and never consider the price after taking. Colonna didn't back down and scolded her. Thea couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. This guy was a typical paranoid. It was hard to say whether his plan to solve the mystery of the universe was right or not. There was no right or wrong here. He had his ideals, and Thea also had her own mission. This wasn't a battle of ideals, dreams, or beliefs. It was purely because the other party had infringed on her interests. If he didn't destroy the universe and stayed at home to study, Thea wouldn't even want to talk to him. These little blue people were all crazy. She raised her arm, and countless emotional threads gathered together. The positive and negative emotions were fully mobilized. The two sides were still 1,000 meters apart. Without saying a word, Thea pushed her right hand forward, and a 100-meter wide and 10-meter tall colorful wall of light pressed forward. The exterior of the light wall was surrounded by a large amount of violent colors. The colors were dazzling to the extreme. It was like an insurmountable mountain, rolling straight towards Colonna. Colonna held a very metallic weapon in his hand. It looked like an energy gun, but both ends of his energy gun were surrounded by incomparably huge electric arcs. He took a serious look at the incoming wall of light as if he was dealing with a mathematical problem. He examined, probed, and dissected it. However, he lost interest in less than a second. He raised the weapon in his hand and rammed it into the emotional shockwave like a spear. The two different types of energy collided with each other. Following an incomparably loud explosion, a large amount of light and heat exploded. The strong light blinded everyone, but they were all veterans of battle. No one would close their eyes or do anything like that. The two scarlet dots in the strong light were very eye-catching. Sia knew that it was Corona. He was not injured at all. Strong, really strong. He took a blow with 70% of her strength and came out unscathed. This guy was the most powerful enemy she had encountered so far. Little girl, you have some skill. Tell me the truth, tell me your secret. Now, immediately, tell me. Colonna roared somewhat crazily. Thea wanted to punch him in the face. Tell you. Tell your sister. You dare to underestimate me. She grabbed Colonna with both hands, ready to drag him back to the DC world. In his normal state, Colonna was a 2-meter-tall man with frightening strength. If he returned to the original world and turned back into a little blue man under the restrictions of the rules, even Diana could beat him up. The two sides were 1,000 meters apart, but Thea's fingers crossed the distance and rested on his shoulder. She exerted force, but he did not move. Although strength was not her forte, Thea had no problem using pure physical force to move a planet. Not to mention, This was not just pure physical force, but also the power of the rules. This guy's equipment was strange. She could see that Colonna's armor was not just for show. The armor used a method that she did not understand at all to dissolve the pulling force and pull her back to Colonna. I take back what I said before. You still have some knowledge for me to read. Colonna grabbed Thea's wrist with one hand and clenched his other hand into a fist to punch Thea's head. Colonna's strength was beyond imagination. Even the god of strength, Darkseid, did not seem to be as strong as him. Was there a scientist in this world with such strength? This was so King illogical, Thea thought to herself. A scientist wanted to fight her in close combat, and she was full of helplessness. She did not have time to use brute force to break free. She gathered a lot of emotional energy in her arm and exploded it, making Colonna grab empty air. Then, she gathered all the divine power in her palm again and punched the enemy's iron fist. The fist that was as white as jade and the fist that was wrapped in thick heavy armor met in midair. Even though it was almost empty space, there was still a huge explosion. The energy shockwave struck the Star Devourer's corpse, smashing out countless craters of varying depths. Thea was sent flying 100 meters, but Colonna's body only shook slightly. He did not retreat but advanced. He raised his energy gun and a bright beam of energy shot directly at Thea. Clang! Thea wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth in midair. The energy beam was already in front of her, and there was no way to dodge. She was ready to leave the space. Fortunately, Diana arrived at the critical moment. The newly built shield took the blow that was equivalent to the power of the whole universe. The energy was very pure. It was the energy that Colonna absorbed after destroying the universe. He believed that there was a part of the power of creation in it. This guy was actually equivalent to the Anti-Watcher in its peak state. When the energy was abundant, it seemed to be endless. It kept hitting the shield with a kai-kai sound. Diana raised the shield with both hands. The shield was built with the materials plundered from the antimaterial world. These materials survived the Big Bang, so one could imagine how strong they were. Even so, it was difficult for the shield to resist the energy beam. Optimistically, the shield could not take more than a few attacks of this level. You're courting death. After being defeated, Thea was also angry. This time, she did not use the power of death. She could use the holy sword again. She instantly changed into the costume that was as tall as Artoria and attacked with the holy sword in her hand. For the original universe, Colonna was a fugitive. The will of the universe wanted to capture him. At this time, the Marvel universe also did not welcome him. If Sia was the role model of following the heavens, then Corona was the role model of going against the heavens and changing his fate. One universe refused to let him in, and the other universe wanted to take him back. The two universes could not come in person. They could only give some help to Thea. A wider range of emotions was mobilized. She could not tell if it was billions, or a sign. She only knew that there were countless intelligent lives providing her with emotions. Chapter 1010. After so many years, Thea experienced the feeling of seed for the first time. The Holy Sword felt the emotions of all living beings. As the pinnacle of fantasy weapons, its power had no limits. It could contain as much energy as you gave it. Thea's sword had reached the peak in terms of momentum, speed, power, conviction, and so on. Colonna had a unique vision. Of course, he would not use his own neck to test the sword. With a light snort, he gave up on Diana and retracted all his power to focus on Thea. The two quickly exchanged 3 moves. Colonna and Thea, who had gone seed, were tied for the moment. At this time, Superman and Thor, who were in the second echelon, rushed over. One swung a fist, the other swung a hammer, and Diana, who took a breather, attacked Colonna together. Are all the women in your world so powerful? Iron Man's armor had an energy detection device. He could naturally see the energy that erupted from Thea and Colonna's moves. He asked Batman a little unhappily. Batman did not pay attention to him. Instead, he took out a toy-like robot from his belt. Then, he took out something like a ray gun and shot it at the robot. Finally, he jumped in quickly. The giant robot was more than 3 meters tall. It was painted iron gray and had a crab-like head. Batman jumped into the giant robot, quickly adjusted various data, and flew to the battlefield. Looks good. Iron Man felt that this big guy was a bit like his anti-Hulk armor. As for its actual combat power, he would only know after fighting it. Thea's sword was now faster than the last. However, the martial arts on Earth were not enough. Colonna's combat power was also amazing. He was like a humanoid supercomputer. He could instinctively analyze the flaws in Thea's moves and counterattack. After the first few moves, she was once again at a disadvantage. Colonna dodged her slash and bent his elbow to attack. The armor around his joints not only provided him with a large amount of energy, but also increased his speed and strength by tens of thousands of times. The power of this attack was not inferior to the full-powered attack of the main cannons of some top technological civilizations. Thea wanted to dodge, but from the corner of her eye, she saw a black shadow jump out from behind her. The black shadow's speed was not fast, but it seemed to have been calculated thousands of times. It was right before the opponent's energy was about to be fired. Batman. Thea saw Batman operating a strange-looking armor. He pushed Colonna's elbow, but he didn't even use half of his strength. Instead, Thea took advantage of the situation and slashed Colonna's left shoulder. This armor isn't bad. It looks familiar. I remember Damien telling me that this is the anti-Thea armor, right? Milady asked while panting. 70% of Colonna's attacks were on her, so she was under a lot of pressure. Batman's voice was still like a dead man's. His voice came from inside the armor and was a little distorted in this space environment. I modified the original armor. This armor is now called the Anti-Justice League armor, also known as the Fenrir armor. Batman's tone was like he was introducing a new product of his own company. The members of the Justice League were not surprised at all. They looked at each other from the corner of their eyes and saw the calmness in each other's eyes. This was very Batman's characteristic. Double couplet was one of the characteristics of fighting monsters while chatting. No matter how dangerous the situation was, they could not forget to chat and fart. Thor looked at the chuckling faces of the Justice League members and asked Superman curiously. Yes, that's right. Asgard's habits made him look down on women. Batman's dark skin was not righteous at all. On the other hand, Thor admired Superman, who used his fists to fight with his enemies. Both of them had strong muscles and seemed to have some common traits. If I remember correctly, you are called the Justice League, right? That's right. Superman was puzzled. Didn't we say our names before? Thor was a little confused. He lowered his voice and asked in a low voice, what does the Anti-Justice League armor mean? Is this guy your enemy? The double couplet had a similar experience fighting side by side with the enemy. Thor felt that he had guessed the truth. Superman's face was bitter. He knew that Thor was asking about Batman, but he did not know how to explain it for a while. He could not say that his friend was crazy, could he? He laughed dryly and dealt with this super awkward topic. However, the consequence of Superman's slight distraction was that Colonna punched him in the face. Even the body of a Kryptonian could not withstand a punch that could shatter a planet. Fortunately, Thor smashed his hammer, causing Colonna's arm to change direction slightly. The punch missed, but even so, Superman was still sent flying more than 100 meters away. His face was deformed. Immediately after, Batman's armor was also severely damaged. The so-called energy gun in Colonna's hand, which was actually a multiversal-level cannon, blasted a big hole in Fenrir's armor. The predecessor of this armor was the Anti-Thea armor. It had high magic resistance, high hardness, and reached the theoretical limit of defense against all kinds of energy attacks. Even so, a hole was still punched through it. Iron Man and Vision opened fire at the same time. Unfortunately, the abilities they were proud of were like small toys in front of Colonna. The impact energy from the Iron Man's palm hit Colonna's armor, but it did not cause any ripples. Without the Soul Gem, Vision's ability had declined a lot. He gathered his greatest strength and fired a pure energy beam from the depression of the original Soul Gem, but it was also shattered by Colonna's hand. The 7 of them used all their strength to besiege him, and the result was shocking. Except for Thea, who could occasionally make some scratches on his armor, the attacks of the others did not cause much damage. We can't beat him. Let's retreat. After fighting for less than a minute and a half, Thea saw that there was no chance of victory and immediately asked them to leave the battlefield quickly. More than a dozen colorful cyclones were summoned out of thin air. All kinds of emotions were intricate, and like waves, they pressed down on Colonna. This kind of invisible continuous attack forced Colonna to take 2 steps back. By the time he opened the energy absorption shield, Thea had already covered them and left the space. They met up with Star-Lord and Gao Tianzuan, who were waiting in the outside world. Considering that they did not have enough top combat power, Thea wanted to see Gao Tianzuan's real body. Her projection returned to Earth with them to discuss the follow-up plan. If Marvel's group of great gods were to attack together, even Corona would have to kneel. However, these guys didn't care about this matter. Among the top fighting forces, the guys on this side didn't care about this matter, and Sia's side couldn't come over. In desperation, they could only find their own helpers. Each group had 40 people, and the 2 groups fought together to defeat Colonna. As for the top combat power, Diana could barely count as half. Thea alone was definitely not enough. She could only unite all the people she could. Chapter 10-11. Speaking of helpers, the hilarious Gao Tianzuan in front of her was one of them. This guy's main body looked like it was about to die, or rather, it was already dead. She did not know whether Gao Tianzuan's body was cold or not, but the body of the other planet devourer was definitely cold. However, as one of the 5 great gods of the universe, although he was the weakest, he would not die so easily. The concept of life and death was not absolute for people of this level. Generally speaking, there was still hope of saving him. Of the 2 helpers who had a certain chance of helping, one was dead, and the other probably had a few drops of HP left. This was Thea's current situation. Are you sure you won't harm me? Gao Tianzuan was cautious about Thea wanting to see his main body. I won't. I need your help now, so I can only suffer a little loss. First, I have to save your main body. Thea's vexed expression made Gao Tianzuan very happy. He felt that he had taken advantage of her. Of course, it was also possible that his main body was about to die and could not be saved without treatment. According to his coordinates, Thea was transported into Gao Tianzuan's personal space. This was a building that looked like a tall tower. The walls were filled with a dazzling array of toys, trophies, souvenirs, and some swords and shields that did not seem to have any energy fluctuations. Ah, do you like to watch combat? Gao Tianzuan asked with interest when he realized that Thea was looking at his display. Thea was speechless. Your main body is about to die, and you still have time to care about these things. How carefree. As soon as she entered the tower, she sensed his main body. His breath was so weak that it was almost indiscernible. However, if others were not in a hurry, why should she be? I have an arena. It's famous in 3 sectors, 19 galaxies, and 1,500 planets. Wasn't it just bragging? Who's afraid of who? Sia described it vividly. My highest record in the gladiator arena is that more than 3,000 brave and skilled warriors from many planets have died in battle in just one day. Gao Tianzuan's mouth formed an O shape. He was momentarily stunned. His arena was more for entertainment than battle, so the death rate was not that high. After chatting with Thea for a long time, he realized that his main body was about to die. Only then did he remember what he wanted to do. Thea pushed open a side door and walked down the spiral staircase to the bottom of the tower. She finally saw the main body of this guy. The bottom of the tower had a diameter of 5 meters, but now it was completely filled by his body. Their appearances were exactly the same, but there was a big hole in the gorgeous and honorable Universe Elder robe on his body. There was an incomparably huge wound on his chest that ran from the front to the back. High heat energy was still lingering around the wound. Even if Gao Tianzuan's recovery ability was the best in the universe, he was still being eroded by the energy bit by bit. His eternal lifespan was about to reach its end. As long as this energy was sucked out, he would be able to recover in a short period of time with his recovery ability. However, Thea did not want to work for nothing. If I remember correctly, your Universal Presbyterian Church has more than 10 people, right? Don't you have any colleagues to help you? She asked curiously. Gao Tianzuan mumbled and did not say anything. It seemed that people of the same trade were enemies. This saying was true no matter where you looked at it. Thea could not help but sigh. The Universal Presbyterian Church was also not united. She looked around the outside world and felt a little disappointed. The rules of Marvel's world were different from her world. The divine weapons here were basically useless. First of all, she did not lack divine weapons. Secondly, Gao Tianzuan's toys accounted for more than half of the things here. Even if she did not need them, she could not give up on collecting payment. She picked and picked, taking away half of Gao Tianzuan's collection. She left all the toys and trophies for him to slowly recall when he had nothing to do. Her thieving behavior caused Gao Tianzuan to be dissatisfied. However, it was only dissatisfaction. Both of them knew that those things were more valuable than practical. It was not difficult to treat him. After all, it was not the 7 bugs and 7 flowers ointment. Colonna was a scientist, not a poison master. His mind was 99% focused on scientific research. His requirements for weapons were very simple. The attack energy had to be thick enough, large enough, and strong enough to destroy the universe for him to study. Thea first checked Gao Tianzuan's wound. He had just finished fighting with Colonna. It was very obvious that this was caused by his energy gun. Could that gun be the space probe? This question needed to be explored next time. She did not find much useful information from the little blue man's memory. From this angle, it was a little like a sneak attack. Gao Tianzuan, this idiot, thought that the other party was playing a game with him. He lost completely because he was brainless. The premise of treatment was to remove the energy residue from the wound. However, the purity of this energy was extremely high. Even if Gao Tianzuan's self-healing ability offset part of it, the rich energy contained in it was still shocking. After thinking about it, using her own energy to slowly erase it was a way, but it would take too long. Thea did not have that much time now. Plus, it would be a pity to erase this energy. After all, such pure energy was very rare in the universe. God knows what kind of black technology Colonna used to collect it. Thea felt that if she placed it in her own small world, it would definitely speed up the process of development. At that point, it would not be far from the creation of a real universe. After considering several factors, she prepared to seal this energy. Previously, she had prepared 7 or 8 pieces of hard material to seal the Tian-Shi. Later, she searched the antimatter universe. She even had a lot of N-metal in her hands. Then, under Gao Tianzuan's puzzled gaze, she took out 3 pieces of broken copper and iron and began to synthesize them. The metal of hell was salvaged from the abyss where the aura of the dead was the strongest. The resentment in it was so strong that even she, the goddess of death, could not help but raise her eyebrows. The metal of hell that was full of death and the N-metal that seemed to have a life of its own were 2 extremes. If they were directly mixed, there would be a big explosion. Fortunately, there was still the antimatter metal as a bridge. These metals that could survive the Big Bang had reached the peak of toughness and hardness. They were able to harmonize the metal of hell and the N-metal. When the 3 were mixed together, they became a brand new substance. Thea quickly pieced the new metal together, and the brand new metal began to shape in her palms. After that, she directly absorbed the energy. Although the energy was slow, it was still absorbed continuously and powerfully. After absorbing for an hour, she felt that the metal seal's ability had reached its limit. She made another piece. It took her more than half a day to save Gao Tianzuan's old life. In order to seal this energy, a total of 9 pieces of brand new metal were used. Thea threw them all into her own small world. When she had time in the future, she would release the seal little by little for her world to absorb. Her task was completed. The rest of the work depended on Gao Tianzuan's self-healing ability. After discussing the follow-up battle matters, Thea directly returned to this side of Earth. At this time, the DC worlds Green Arrow, Zatanna, Firestorm, Atom Man, Martian Hunter, Shockwave, Telescopic Man, and Frost Killer also rushed over as the second wave of support. Chapter 10-12. On Marvel's side, they finally came to a consensus after Team America's brainwashing. They called in the Fantastic Four and Black Bat King. Professor X also brought in Laser Eye and Xinglei. Heroes were gathered, but no one had decided on how to fight the final battle. Thea threw another question at them. She wanted to save the planet Devourer. I don't understand this guy's life form. Who knows how to save him? She asked a few Marvel locals. Her gaze stopped on Iron Man, Mr. Fantastic, Professor X, Doctor Strange, and Black Bat King. They had secretly established the Illuminati outside of the double couplet. The few people in front of her were members of the Illuminati. They knew more secret information than the double couplet. The leader of the Fantastic Four, Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, looked at her curiously. Thea could see from his gaze that he did not fully trust their alliance. The planet Devourer's temperament is unpredictable. Are you sure he will help us? Reed asked. Star swallowing was not Thea's pet. How would she know what he would do? She shook her head. I'm not sure. I don't even know what he has done. It's just that our strength is not enough to fight against Colonna. We need allies. He was killed by Colonna. He will be our natural ally. With so many forces gathered together, we still can't fight against that Colonna. Professor X spoke very kindly. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was like a spring breeze. He was an old man with a very elegant temperament. A bald old man. Thea respected the elderly, but she also needed to show her strength. She looked around and waved at Thor, who was drinking not far away. Thor was confused. Why did she call him? Thea pointed at Thor. He should be one of the more powerful people here, but he still couldn't take a single blow from Colonna. What she was trying to say was that the strongest player on their side couldn't even take a single hit from Colonna, while she was able to fight for a minute with him. Didn't that mean that she was awesome? The few from the Illuminati were all smart people and understood the subtext immediately. Especially since the Iron Man had also participated in the battle, his words were even more convincing. I have reservations about reviving Star Swallowing. Mr. Fantastic had interacted with Star Swallowing and Silver Shadowman before, so he was one of the more authoritative people present. How about this? This is our last resort. We don't know if we can revive Star Swallowing, so we can only give it a try. It's hard to guarantee the outcome. Professor X tried to smooth things over. Sia did not force him too much. The Star Devourer could just lie there like a corpse. She had just found a better target. She pointed at Xinglei, who was sitting on the sofa not far away and seemed to be absent-minded. That lady's strength is simply shocking. If she also participates in the battle, I'll have confidence. The few from the Illuminati gasped in unison. Should they let Colonna fuse the two worlds and cause the universe to explode, let the Dark Phoenix destroy the universe, or let Star Swallowing eat the universe? There seemed to be no worse choice among the three, only worse. Even Professor X's expression changed drastically. He didn't know how to answer this woman from another world. Xinglei's strength was not under her control at all. Thea looked at them, exchanging glances. She didn't say anything to persuade them, nor did she leave. She just sat there and waited. The power of the Phoenix was an unexpected surprise. She had been so busy with Colonna that she didn't even think about the power of the Phoenix before seeing Xinglei. Even though she was far away, she could feel the power. It was the embodiment of the life and emotions of the universe. The power of the Phoenix was like the child of the universe. This power covered 1 to 10 dimensions. It was immortal and changeable. It was impossible to control this power with human thoughts. Other powers would definitely lose their effectiveness after leaving Marvel and entering DC, but the power of the Phoenix wouldn't. It was an omnipotent, universe-level power. Xinglei's power was not even the tip of the iceberg. If Thea could observe this power at a close distance, it would be of great benefit to her. In the face of Thea's questions, they didn't use excuses such as denying, refusing to cooperate, or saying that they had seen wrongly. Although the few from the Illuminati had a lot of problems, as human elites, They still had their pride and couldn't lie to her face. It was still Professor X who spoke. "Madam, I don't know what you saw, but Jean's power is very dangerous. She can't control it herself. I suggest that we don't choose this option. I can help her control her own power. We are just passers-by. The power still belongs to this lady. If you are in danger again in the future, she will be an important combat force, unless you think that her nature is not righteous." Professor X was speechless again. Jean was definitely not evil, but she could give birth to an evil personality. It would be a bit of a lie to say that she was righteous. The universe is about to be destroyed. My family is there. I don't want to complicate things, but her power is very important to both universes. Why don't we listen to her opinion? Thea took a step back in order to advance. Professor X couldn't make the decision on this issue that involved personal freedom and democracy. He and Jean exchanged a few words on the mental channel. This intellectual beauty in her 30s, who could be considered a mature woman, walked over slowly. Everyone knew that they had spoken on the mental channel, but Professor X still asked the question again in front of everyone. Laser Eye, who had always had an unusual affection for Jean, looked at her nervously, not knowing what choice she would make. Has the crisis become so serious? As the oldest generation of X-Men, Jean had a sense of the big picture. Her question hit the nail on the head. The few people from the Illuminati looked at Iron Man. At this moment, their own judgment was the most accurate. Iron Man nodded without thinking too much. At the same time, Doctor Strange also said, "London Sanctum lost contact a minute ago. The fusion of the two universes is accelerating. Then I will join the battle. Tell me what to do," Jean said generously. Sia raised her hand and waved, and the few of them instantly seemed to be among the stars in the universe. Countless stars flashed past, and the universe seemed to be accelerated by dozens of times. The galaxy danced in the sky, and the surrounding scenery was extremely bright. She wanted to pull Jean out for a private chat, but she knew that it was impossible. She could only pull in the Illuminati and Laser Thor. They were all elites among superheroes. They didn't have any problems with shouting, except for Laser Eye, who was a little nervous. "Ms. Gray, do you know your ability?" "Not really. I only know that it's called the Phoenix Power. There's another personality in my body. She might know, but I really don't. Also, you can call me Jean. That's what my friends call me." Jean was very calm. She had faced countless hardships and had the courage to make choices, even if it meant sacrificing her life. Chapter 10:13. Tsinglei, the mature woman, was neither servile nor overbearing. Although her tone was a little pessimistic, she still maintained good etiquette. "All right, you can also call me Thea. I'll try to explain it as simply as possible. This is very important for successfully communicating with the power in your body." Thea spoke slowly so that the people around her could hear. "I don't know why you call that power the power of the Phoenix. In my opinion, it's very pure and broad, to the extent that it can't be described with words. We have a similar ability, but the level of the energy in your body is not as high." With that, she showed Jean the white light in her left hand and the first light in her right. The power of life and the power of emotions mixed together. This is the foundation of the energy in your body. With that, Thea took out a small ball of energy from each of her rings and mixed it together, indicating for Jean to feel it herself. Jean reached out to touch the energy ball nervously, and a look of realization appeared on her face. She had been holding back the power of the Phoenix for so many years, guarding it to the death, not allowing any of the energy to leak out. However, she had never studied what the power of the Phoenix was and what it was made of. Now that she had come into contact with it, she was enlightened. "That's true. Sia, you're amazing. Is this your own ability?" "Of course. Back to the topic, humans have life and emotions. Actually, if we magnify these two concepts, planets have life and emotions too. We have a planet called Mogo that has its own consciousness, but she's still very young, like a child. Do you have a planet with self-consciousness here?" Thea asked casually, as if she was chatting casually. "Ah, you've met Star-Lord. His father is said to be a planet." Iron Man replied. If they had one, he could not say that he did not have one. How could he be afraid at this time? Ignore the fact that Star-Lord's father was a bad planet. Thea replied with an "oh" and continued, the energy in your body is of a higher level than the planet's consciousness. It's the life and emotions born in your original universe. You have to surpass humans and planets. Imagine the entire universe as an individual. It has always been there and has been evolving along with the evolution of the entire universe. At this time, not only Jean, but a few of the smarter ones were also pondering. Imagining such a huge universe as an individual was a test of one's imagination. If the universe was an individual, what was one? Microbes. Seeing that they had digested the information, Thea changed the topic. With all due respect, you can't exert even 1/10,000th of the power of that energy because it's too great. But even this 1/10,000th is enough to help us defeat Colonna. Then what do you want me to do? Of course I'm willing to participate in the battle, but this kind of power is completely uncontrollable. I've tried everything I can. Thea stretched out 2 fingers. It's actually not that difficult. You need someone to share the Phoenix's power with you. I'm just starting to. I'll do it. I'm willing to do it. Radium Ray didn't wait for her to finish before volunteering himself. To be able to share the burden of the person he loved, he would smile even in his dreams. The more he looked at this woman from another world, the more he liked her. Thea was a little speechless. My initial plan is to create 2 rings. One of them is the power of emotions. The wearer must have sufficient emotions. Laser Eye was overjoyed. I'm famous for my rich emotions. My will is also strong enough. Thea was simply too pleasing to the eye. If it wasn't for the fact that this was not the right place, he would have cut off the chicken's head and become sworn siblings. Thea thought of something and almost burst out laughing. But she still pretended to be happy. That's great. Also, we have to create a life ring. The wearer must have sufficient life force. Laser Eye's eyes couldn't be seen because of his large eye patch. But from his facial expression, it was obvious that he was at a loss. Phut, haha, haha, I'm dying of laughter. There was almost no superhero here who didn't know the relationship between Laser Eye, Jean, and Wolverine. Strong life force. Was there anyone with stronger life force than Wolverine these days? Iron Man and Thor laughed very unkindly. Doctor Strange and Mr. Fantastic thought that Thea didn't know. After all, Wolverine wasn't present today. The 2 were trying hard to hold it in, afraid that they would laugh out loud. Even Dr. X, a good man, had a headache when he thought of the entanglement between the 3 students. Thea pretended to be ignorant. Laser Eye and Jean were embarrassed, but this was not suitable to be said in public, at least not in front of a room of outsiders. As for whether Deadpool could do it except for Wolverine, the 2 automatically ignored this person. The love triangle was messy enough. They didn't want to provoke the guy who liked to make trouble. What did I say wrong? She asked knowingly. No, please continue. Laser Eye was so depressed that he didn't know who to complain to. Then I'll continue. If 2 people help you share the burden, you can control the power of the Phoenix for a short period of time. This time depends on the emotions and life force of the 2 wearers. Even if the power of the Phoenix is only 1/10,000th of the overall will, it can't be borne by an individual's spiritual power. The birth of a new personality in your body is the result of long-term spiritual pressure. If my plan to share the burden can be realized, I think that personality will gradually be assimilated by you. After saying that, she snapped her fingers, and the few of them returned to the Avengers headquarters again, as if they had never left. Since Laser Eye and Mr. Scott are willing to share the emotional burden, then find the person with the strongest life force. It's best to be a close friend or family member or something because the spiritual power of the 3 people is connected, and there will be some telepathy. If you have no problems, we can continue to the next step. Thea said calmly. The leaders of the Illume Union, including the Black Bat King who usually couldn't speak, looked at Professor X strangely. This was Professor X's family matter, and they wisely chose to watch. The old bald professor was a little conflicted, but he quickly made up his mind. If Jean could really use the power of the phoenix freely, it would definitely be a good thing. As for the dispute between the three students, let them solve it themselves. He informed Wolverine in the spiritual channel, and Thea made the ring. The laws of the two worlds were different, but the lantern ring manufacturing technology that First Lamp taught the little blue man was really amazing. God knows how many years this technology had surpassed the current world. Using the ring to hold emotions and use emotions was still incredible today. It didn't take long for Wolverine, a burly man with a rough aura, to arrive at the headquarters of the Avenger Alliance. He was accompanied by the white-haired and black-clothed Storm. Thea quickly finished the initial ring manufacturing work, and the few of them briefly introduced it. Chapter 10:14. Mr. Logan's life force is indeed strong. If you don't have any objections, shall we begin? Wolverine, of course, had no objections. Like Laser Eye, he agreed without much thought. Thea symbolically asked for Dr. Strange's opinion. In the real world, the power of the Phoenix was too destructive. Even a trace of its aura would cause immeasurable damage to the universe. Although the magicians in this world were a bunch of weaklings, the dead Alpha Centauri and Dr. Strange in front of her were very strong. In her opinion, they were both at the same level as Circe. The 3 temples set up by Alpha Centauri when she was the Sorcerer Supreme were not bad. It was the same principle as the new world she had set up. It was to intercept all high-dimensional enemies in a slightly higher plane. Now it was time to borrow the defensive facilities inside. Most of the heroes stayed at the Avengers' headquarters. A few magic enthusiasts, or those who had a deep interest in magic, such as Iron Man and Batman, also followed. Lady Sophie did not care about the onlookers. As the president's daughter, it was normal to be surrounded by onlookers. She could read comic books at the press conference, but this was nothing. However, Uncle Wolf and Laser Eye were not used to so many people standing around. Thea sat cross-legged in the empty hall and beckoned them to sit in front of her. The magicians of the New York Sanctum were initially startled by this group of people. Although Dr. Strange gave up the idea of seclusion after he came to power, they were still surprised to see so many non-magicians at once. The remaining 3 protagonists sat in a triangle according to her instructions. Jean sat in the back, while Laser Eye and Wolverine sat in front. Thea handed each of them a ring. I will divert 2 main forces from the power of the Phoenix. The Ring of Life can make your life force more vigorous, and the Ring of Emotion can add emotional energy to your attacks. In addition, the 3 of you will have some telepathy in the future. Pretending not to know the relationship between the 3 of them, she held back her laughter and spoke seriously. A man and a woman having mutual feelings was very beautiful and sweet. Even if it was a man and a woman, it was fine. However, if there was another person in the middle, the feeling could not be described with words. Laser Eye and Wolverine's eyes inadvertently met. The 2 of them quickly looked away as if they had seen something horrifying. Thea coughed, indicating that she was about to begin. What if I lose control? Jean asked uncertainly. Thea had to pretend on the spot. I've seen the Thanos you dealt with before. My strength is about the same as his. The power of the Phoenix is indeed powerful, but to say something arrogant, the power in your body is not even 1/10,000th of the total. If I go all out, even if you're in your dark state, you're still not my opponent. These words were not polite, but they all breathed a sigh of relief. In order to reassure her, Thea directly released more than 10 sealing techniques on Jean's body. Try it. How much of the power of the Phoenix can be mobilized in this sealed state? Jean was a little nervous at first, but after a little feeling, she found that the power of the Phoenix that she used to suppress with more than half of her spiritual power did not seem to exist. This made her have some understanding of Thea's strength. Continue, gradually release your restrictions, Thea said casually. Jean gritted her teeth, clenched her fists, and gradually relaxed her spiritual power. It had to be said that it was very impressive for a mortal to be able to control and suppress it to this extent. The process of letting Jean release a trace of the power of the Phoenix was easy to say, but it could break through many barriers. The power of the Phoenix relied on its own characteristics to continuously break through barriers until a trace of energy as thick as a finger was absorbed. It had been going on for an hour. Of course, Thea was not here to learn Lei Feng. If she were to stay in the world of Marvel, mastering the power of the Phoenix was not a bad choice. Unfortunately, she was just a passerby. Even so, the power of the Phoenix was very useful as a reference. Life and emotions were only the foundation. There were many deeper mysteries within that required her careful study. In fact, Scarlet Witch's power of chaos was also very valuable for research. Unfortunately, unlike Xinglei, who was the host, Scarlet Witch was more of a user. As for the even more illusory power of the fairies, she did not even think about it. It was too far away. Xinglei deliberately opened a gap in the heavy cage, and a trace of the power of the Phoenix was directly absorbed. It hovered in Thea's palm like a flame with its own life force, but its concept was much more advanced than that of a flame. In the deepest part of her consciousness, spirit, will, and all thoughts, Thea saw the shadow of the power of the Phoenix. It had its own will, as if it casually cast a glance from a higher dimension. Thea bowed slightly to show her respect, and at the same time returned a smile. Both sides made a simple contact and retreated. The power of the Phoenix was like a bystander, watching Thea divide the energy and project it into the two rings. It can be done like this. Although they did not use simple words to communicate, the meaning was the same. Thea gave the power of the Phoenix the method of making the rings and dividing the energy. In the future, when it chose a host, it would be much easier, and it would not have to compete with the host like a tug-of-war. Buy one get two free, a threesome would be the standard for the future host of the power of the Phoenix. Similarly, the power of the Phoenix, as a thank you, cut off the remaining part of the spiritual connection. A small spark like a candle in the wind became Thea's private property. The extent of her research had nothing to do with the power of the Phoenix. Both sides took what they needed. From now on, the power of the Phoenix could ease the conflict with the host, and Thea also got what she needed. In the outside world, with her actions, a surge of life force and emotional power seemed to be extracted from the sea, and the surging energy was injected into the two rings. With Jean as the center, two energy lines connected to Laser Eye and Wolverine. The power of the Phoenix was directly injected, and even though it was transferred by Jean, the two heroes still fell into a temporary state of confusion. Jean, on the other hand, was sharing the burden mentally. According to Thea's instructions, she carefully opened various restrictions, and countless energy surged out from an unknown area and entered her body. Using the spiritual connection between the three of them, an external cycle was carried out with her, the host, through the two rings. For a moment, the three of them closed their eyes to communicate for the first time. Thea stood at the side and carefully experienced the charm of the power of the Phoenix. She could use other people's things as a reference, but she could not copy them. She was also trying to use her life force and emotions to synthesize a power that belonged to her alone. What should she call it? Thea's power? It seemed a little shameful. The young lady's mind wandered, and some subtle changes began to happen to Xinglei's body. Her hair became redder, and her temperament became colder. At the same time, a power that far exceeded the limits of the universe began to burst out in her body. Chapter 10:15. Her evil personality is about to awaken. I suggest we. Iron Man pointed at Jean and said to Thea, "Aren't you awesome? Hurry up and suppress her." Thea glanced at him and shook her head gently. I don't know what level of psychological development you have here, but when a personality is suppressed for a long time, the longer it is suppressed, the greater the rebound will be. You want to use this opportunity to eliminate the psychological barrier? I'm afraid it won't be easy. Dr. Strange Stephen Strange was once an excellent surgeon, and he also understood psychology. At this time, he was not optimistic about this attempt. In his opinion, the illness should be eliminated step by step, instead of diverting energy and treating the illness at the same time. This was too disorganized. Jean's problem is the power of the Phoenix. If we can remove the barrier between her two personalities, then she will truly be able to enjoy her own happiness. We have a type of dynamic structure psychotherapy where we can create a childhood environment around her and search for the similarities between her two personalities. After that, Thea said as she spread her magic and simulated Jean's childhood environment. Her father was a history professor, and frankly speaking, if there were no mutants, her life would not have been so rough. Dr. Strange, who had a long face, was a little surprised. I didn't expect you to be so good at medicine. I have a doctorate in biogenetics and medicine. The relationship between the two sorcerers suddenly became much closer. From genetics to biopharmaceuticals, all the way to modern clinical practice, whether it was theory or practice, they found a lot of common topics. Dr. Strange himself was an authority in surgery, and Thea had done a lot of illegal experiments and accumulated a lot of knowledge. Coupled with her identity as a sorcerer, they each had their own unique views on the connection between magic and medicine, although Thea felt that these might be the views of Alpha Centauri. Mage Alpha Centauri died early, and most of Dr. Strange's strength was self-taught. Many of his ideas were taken for granted, and Thea pointed out his mistakes at key points. He couldn't help but be amazed. While they were chatting happily, the mags from the New York Holy Cathedral, who were usually arrogant but were actually a bunch of weaklings, were shocked. The power of the Phoenix was entering this world, and the magnificence of the power was beyond the limits of their imagination. A few of them could not care less about being the heroes of the double couplet. Some of them began to repair the magic circle, some strengthened the original defense, and some avoided eye contact, preparing to pack up and run. Thea snickered. For Dr. Strange's sake, she snapped her fingers. Wolverine's and Laser Eye's rings began to slow down, and Jean, who had lost all her energy, slowly regained consciousness. You! Her eyebrows were slightly raised, and there was a dark red energy fluctuation in her palm. Then, as if she had thought of something, she gradually calmed down and finally calmed down. How is it? Do you feel any discomfort now? Thea automatically put herself in the role of a doctor. It's easy. The burden on my body seems to have lessened by half, and my personality seems to have changed a little. Xinglei usually stayed at Professor X's place as a teacher. Although Professor X did not have the qualifications to run a school, and the graduation certificate he issued was somewhat indescribable and not recognized by the country, Xinglei herself had a doctorate. Xinglei's doctorate might have been obtained through some kind of mind control ability, but after all, she had received higher education. After splitting into two personalities, she had self-taught herself a lot of psychological knowledge, and she was very clear about her current state of mind. I think you don't have to reject the dark personality. That's you, too. We all have darkness in our hearts that we don't know about. Our Superman here, your Captain America, is the same. As long as you understand what you're doing, it's fine. All right, you should rest well. After saying that, she opened a portal and returned to the Avengers headquarters. A bunch of them also stepped through the portal noisily, leaving a bunch of weak sorcerers to clean up the scene. With Xinglei, the Dark Phoenix that she had magically modified, plus himself and Gao Tianzuan, who had recovered from his injuries, the three of them theoretically had a 50% chance of winning against Colonna, who was at the peak of the multiverse. In addition, there were Diana, Superman, Doctor Strange, and Thor, the two cheats Batman and Iron Man, as well as Captain America, who could take a punch from Thanos and represented the core values of the United States of America, counting all the remaining heroes, such as Scarlet Witch and Iceman, who were currently weak but had great potential. They might be able to help if they held back a big move during the battle. Overall, the chances of winning were still very high. The few of them briefly discussed the next plan. Thea needed to stabilize her state. Her strength here was fluctuating, and many of her extreme emotions had to be temporarily blocked in order to stabilize her strength. And in order to make full use of their advantage in numbers, it was imperative to fight inside Star Swallowing's body. After all, many heroes did not have the ability to survive in space. With Jean's help, she no longer mentioned the resurrection of Star Swallowing. But how to lead the team and rush in was a problem for them. Colonna was not a fool, nor was he a monster in the Instance dungeon. Now that the defense of the space barrier had been strengthened, once they entered, they would be greeted with energy attacks that were called energy guns but were actually space cannons. Thea could not take more than a few of these high-energy attacks. She would not stand there like a target to maintain the passage between the two worlds. We can take Star-Lord's spaceship, Dawn, and rush in directly. That spaceship is the strongest spaceship I have ever seen, but it requires a very high amount of energy to break through the space barrier. Iron Man suggested a good idea, and then discussed it with Mr. Fantastic and Batman. As for the original owner of the spaceship, she was ignored by them. Seeing that there was nothing for her to do here, Thea gently smoothed Diana's frown. Let's go out for a walk. We can take a good look around New York. I saw a shoe store before, and it seemed to have good taste. Thea suggested. With her strength, she did not need to sharpen her spear at the last minute. The only thing she needed was to relax as much as possible in order to maximize her combat power. Diana thought about it. Every time she went to a parallel universe, she would fight and kill. This time, it was a good thing to relax before the final battle. She immediately decided to go shopping with her. Since they were going shopping, they definitely could not carry a shield and a sword. Diana also changed into casual clothes, and the two walked out hand in hand. The Avenger building, a pentagonal building, had a strange sense of direction. The two goddesses changed their clothes and walked half a circle before they found the exit. When they reached the exit, Tony Stark, who had changed into a handsome suit, sunglasses, and a mustache, was greeting them in the car. His fat bodyguard was driving. Two beautiful ladies, do you need a guide? Chapter 10:16. Although he waved at the two goddesses flirtatiously, Tony Stark subconsciously didn't like people who carried shields. Diana's personality was resolute and heroic, full of charisma as a leader. With all these factors combined, he kept a respectful distance from this tall Valkyrie. His main target was Thea. The young lady was full of modern vibes. She had a cheerful personality and was able to chat with anyone. As for whether Tony Stark had the intention of monitoring the two of them, other than striking up a conversation, no one could say for sure. Thea immediately understood his intentions. The young lady instantly counterattacked. She gently lifted Diana's chin, tilted her head slightly, and kissed her. Diana was also very smart. Two red tongues teased and entangled in each other's mouths. They kissed for a full half a minute before parting. It was worth mentioning that when they parted, there was an eye-catching crystal line between their lips. Ah! I suddenly remembered that there's a problem with my armor. Take good care of our guests. Tony sighed and patted the fat bodyguard's shoulder. He opened the car door from the other side and walked back with waning interest. They didn't reject the free driver and car. Tony Stark, the pervert, was chased away. However, in order to reassure the people in the double couplet, Thea pulled Vision and Scarlet Witch into the car. I have little experience living outside. I'm afraid I can't be a guide. Scarlet Witch said, a little ashamed. She had no experience. The robot-like Vision had never left the house except for a few group activities. However, after considering various factors, Vision agreed on behalf of the two of them. As for whether it was because he was curious about living outside, no one knew. The back of Tony Stark's car was very spacious. It wasn't cramped for the four of them. There was even a wine rack and a square table. Thea chatted with them about fashion, art, society, movies, and other issues. Scarlet, which was at a loss and didn't know how to answer. Vision, on the other hand, seemed to be reciting something from a book. Everything about productivity and production was confusing. This may be a little presumptuous, but you don't seem to leave the headquarters much. Is it because of Mr. Vision? Thea asked. Vision and Scarlet looked at each other. Actually, both of us have some problems. The Avengers' headquarters is now our home. Thea thought for a moment and smiled. Her smile was as beautiful as a painting. Even Scarlet was a little intoxicated by it. Actually, there are many life forms in the universe. Appearance is not important as long as you acknowledge yourself. There are many unique life forms in our universe. If you care, you can change your appearance and come out for a stroll. Scarlet Witch sighed. The outside world is very unfriendly to us, so we rarely take this kind of transportation. Now that Thea had obtained the power of the Phoenix, she was also a little interested in Scarlet Witch's power of chaos. If it was a one-on-one battle, Doctor Strange could beat the current Scarlet Witch. However, Doctor Strange's magic was mediocre in Thea's eyes. He won because he used his abilities to the extreme. Chaos magic was a unique system that was completely different from the existing magic. Thea pretended to be curious and asked, "You should be a magic user too, right? Changing your appearance isn't that difficult. Is there a rule in your world that forbids the use of magic?" After she said that, she pointed at Vision. The robot-like Vision suddenly turned into a bearded Captain America. Even the vicissitudes of life between his eyebrows were similar. The two were shocked. Vision touched himself and found that there were no changes. "It's just a small illusion. His magic resistance is very high. I'm not very good at transformation magic, but I can change his appearance in the eyes of ordinary people." Milady spoke frankly. Scarlet Witch's interest was piqued and she humbly asked for advice. Thea easily saw Scarlet Witch's chaos magic. "Your energy can't actually be called magic anymore. It's too violent. It's full of destructive nothingness, and its formability is very poor." Thea absorbed a small cluster of energy from Scarlet Witch's hand and felt it with her heart. Not long after, the energy disappeared automatically. This meant that the energy did not belong to Scarlet. At best, she was the user. Scarlet Witch was a mutant. Her mutant ability was to change probability. Together with chaos magic, the combination of the two abilities could achieve the effect of changing reality. Thea tried several methods, but the power of chaos did not give her a chance to do anything. She could only look but not touch. Unlike the power of the Phoenix, which could be communicated, the power of chaos ignored her. However, she was not discouraged. After a little research, she gave up on this ability. Like the anti-life equation, the power of chaos pursued destruction. It was not suitable for her. However, she also helped Scarlet Witch think of a way. If she wanted to use magic for something other than combat, there were still ways. Downgrade. Lower your energy level. Without the violent aura, your control will increase greatly. The only drawback is that it will consume more energy. Thea's knowledge was far greater than Scarlet Witch's. She experimented as she spoke. Not long after, Scarlet Witch's magic stabilized. The overflowing energy of red smoke disappeared. Her eyes were less violent and more gentle. The method was definitely correct, but if she wanted to use it at a lower level, she would need time to master it. Next, Thea changed Vision's face into a common face. He and the fat bodyguard acted as carriers. As for paying the bill, they could only put it on Stark Industries or Double Couplet. Thea's money could not be used here, and she could not buy a pair of shoes and barter. That would be too much. It had to be said that New York was very big. They had only walked one street when it was almost evening. "Let's go back. It's already very late." The fat bodyguard was so tired that he was covered in sweat. He had gone back and forth 3 times and now had 7 or 8 bags in his hands. He looked at Thea and Diana strangely. "Are you really here to protect the world? Are you not here to have fun?" Thanks to the sweet atmosphere between the two goddesses, Vision and Scarlet, the lovers also enjoyed themselves. There was no burden on their minds. Someone paid the bill, someone carried the bags, and they took whatever they saw. Was there anything better than this in the world? Only the fat bodyguard was fed a mouthful of dog food, which was the main reason why he was a little grumpy. "It's not too late, is it? The night view of a big city is also beautiful. Do you all go to bed at 8 o'clock? Thea looked at the fat bodyguard in amusement. Which international metropolis would go to bed at 8 o'clock? It was not like they were from ancient times. The fat bodyguard shook his head. Chapter 10:17. Let's go for a drink, Thea said, pointing to a bar. Now surrounded by happiness, Vision and Scarlet did not hesitate. The fat bodyguard could only follow them while calling his boss. "Does this count as working overtime tonight? New York is not peaceful at night. God knows which villain will jump out to make trouble." The fat bodyguard felt a lot of pressure. He was afraid that Thea would cause trouble, but he was also afraid that the bad guys in New York would smear his world. His luck was good. It didn't take long for Tony Stark and Thor, who had changed into casual clothes, to arrive together. Scarlet Witch and Vision, who had been studied by Hydra for many years, were a little overwhelmed by the hustle and bustle in the bar of human society. Magic and precision calculation did not tell them what to do. The two sat awkwardly in the chair until Tony and Thor entered the door, and they recovered some of their calmness. "Why did you bring them to the bar?" Tony complained. Thea disagreed. "They are not children." "What's the problem? Your thinking is a bit old-fashioned." Tony almost vomited blood. "I'm old-fashioned? Are you sure you're talking about me and not Steve Rogers? You can't find anyone more open-minded than me in the whole United States." Thea ignored the angry Tony Stark. With a wave of her right hand, everyone had a glass in front of them. Even the fat bodyguard was not ignored. After that, she poured a glass of wine for each of them. "Come and try our fine wine. This is the wine of the god of wine, Dionysus." To show her sincerity, she and Diana had a drink first. Thor picked up the glass and poured it without saying a word. "Good wine." Tony, the fat bodyguard, Scarlet Witch, and Vision also drank it. It is worth mentioning that Vision is a robot. The wine will be directly converted into energy and absorbed by the body. Again, to be able to fight side by side this time, Thea poured another glass for each of them. This time, the atmosphere became more lively. The dining table was indeed a good place to build relationships. By the time he finished his third glass, Thor had already started shouting, for Asgard. Fortunately, Thea had set up a soundproof and illusion enchantment, so it looked like they were just chatting to each other. The wine of Dionysus would bring out the joy in everyone's heart. They all had a good time. Not caring where Asgard's door was facing, they all shouted, for Asgard. After all, Tony Stark was still an ordinary person. After drinking 5 glasses of this kind of fine wine, he couldn't take it anymore. Considering that she couldn't bring a drunkard to fight Kelowna tomorrow, Thea asked the fat bodyguard to take him back first. They could teleport back or fly back later. After the 2 ordinary people left, the remaining few were not ordinary. The atmosphere finally warmed up. "What is a god like in your world?" Thor could tell that this question had been bothering him for a long time. "We are gods. My father is the main god, and my mother is a blessed ordinary person." Diana answered quickly. "What's your relationship with Hela?" Thor asked Thea very seriously. Who was Hela? Diana's attention was also attracted. Judging from the name, it was a woman. "Was there a third party?" "I don't know her. I've never heard of her." Thea denied. "They had no relationship to begin with. But your strength seems a bit similar. How did you break my hammer back then? Were you already this strong back then?" Thea frowned slightly. "What do you mean back then? To you, it was a few years ago, but in my timeline, it hasn't even been a day." Thor did not fully understand. Before Thea could explain, they heard a loud bang. It sounded like something heavy had hit the wall, followed by the sound of several pistols and submachine guns. Before they could decide whether to continue drinking or go out to take a look, they saw a burly man rush into the soundproof barrier like a ball. Naturally, the barrier was broken. The man was stunned, and so were the few who were drinking. "Hey! The guy on the ground was beaten up by me. I really didn't know you were here." Not far away, Little Spider, who was wearing red tights, was apologizing to them. It was not a good thing to let the people from another world see their city in a mess. "It's okay." Thea lifted her leg and kicked the man on the ground to Little Spider. They could not drink anymore, so they flew back to rest. "It's not peaceful here. I think it's worse than the metropolis," Diana and Thea said in the telepathic channel. Wasn't that right? New York was normal and harmonious during the day, but it was lively at night. There was 1 hero per city in DC, and 1 hero per block here. But even so, there were still not enough. There were too many bad guys. Little Spider needed to participate in the battle tomorrow, but they could not stop fighting criminals at night. Daredevil was fighting, Punisher was fighting, and Iron Fist was also fighting. The whole city was noisy at night, as if it was Chinese New Year. Seeing that there was nothing for her to do, Thea pulled Diana back to sleep. It was really tiring. In someone else's territory, they did not do anything. They just turned off the lights and went to sleep. This habitual action made the people in the double couplet boo. The other world seems to be very open-minded in terms of concept. The next morning, they were woken up by the sound of metal colliding. They changed their clothes and went outside to take a look. It was really lively. Batman was controlling his new Fenrir armor to fight against Thor, and Tony Stark also took out his trump card, the armor he named Odin's Blessing, to fight against Superman. Thea mainly looked at the Iron Man's new armor. It was different from his usual bright gold and red color. This armor looked a little deep and introverted. To put it simply, it was a little black. The arms, shoulders, and thighs were all sharp spikes. After the armor was activated, dark red energy flowed through the whole body. Whether it was strength or speed, it could bring a huge improvement to the user. As long as the reactor in the chest ran in the opposite direction, it could fire an energy cannon with a large range. This thing is called Odin's Blessing armor? Thea asked Vision beside her. After getting a positive answer, Thea was a little amused. Was this armor really Odin's Blessing? Did Tony Stark steal Asgard's destroyer and modify it himself? Apart from the head, this thing was no different from the destroyer in every other aspect. This was obviously the one that Thor had destroyed on Earth. Superman still had his old habit of holding back. For a while, he was suppressed by the Iron Man. On the other side, Batman and Thor were fighting fiercely. The Fenrir armor's high magic resistance and high defense made Thor unable to use his strength. Thea took a few glances and pulled Diana to eat breakfast. On the way, they saw a few people also fighting on their own. It was understandable for them to cooperate in the battle later. Chapter 10:18. For example, Green Arrow and Hawkeye were competing in archery. The two of them had fixed targets and moving targets, from long range to melee. Zatanna and Scarlet, which were discussing magic, Martian Manhunter and Professor X were having morning tea, and Atom Man and Ant-Man were discussing who was smaller. Jean, you guys. Good morning. Seeing the entangled trio in the restaurant, Thea felt that the three of them probably didn't sleep all night. Of course, she didn't think too much about it, it was just a normal thought. The three of them greeted her awkwardly. As the main force, Jean had to participate in the battle today. She changed into a red and black leather jacket with the X-Men logo on the belt. Her hair fell over her shoulders, and her temperament was colder than yesterday. Compared to yesterday, she was a little cold, but it was not a big problem. This was a necessary stage of the initial personality fusion. Fighting, especially in the face of a strong enemy, could also speed up the process. Miss Quinn, how far apart does this ring need to be for it to take effect? Miss Quinn, what should the ring do if it wants to close the loop? Miss Quinn, this ring. The two heroes threw out 7 or 8 questions at once, and she could only answer them one by one. Then, under the resentful eyes of the two, she pulled Diana and fled. On the way, she whispered the relationship between the three of them, and Valkyrie chuckled. Then will they be like this in the future? Thea scratched her cheek and thought for a moment, and said uncertainly, maybe. They walked into the meeting room, laughing. The heroes gathered together today, ready to fight Kelowna to the death. Gao Tianzuan's hiding ability was very strong. He had already entered first, waiting for their attack signal, and then they could deal with Kelowna together. The old cunning man's fighting ability might be a little weak, but his hiding ability had not been lost after so many years. Both sides shouted 2 slogans and boarded Star-Lord's Dawn. This is it, start accelerating. Thea found a weak point in space, and then Star-Lord directly increased the energy supply to the ship to the maximum, and rushed into the empty void. When the energy reached a certain level, it would naturally break through space. Their flying ship directly broke through the barrier and entered the area where the two worlds converged. Not far away, Star Swallowing's corpse was still there. The heroes were fully armed and checked their equipment one last time. Kelowna was not alone. He had gathered a lot of space pirates and interstellar criminals under his command. Some were from Marvel, and some were from DC. These were the information that Batman had gathered from the probe that he had thrown out during the last battle. The heroes needed to rush into the central control area, find Kelowna, and defeat him. Boom! With a loud crash, the spaceship made a hard landing. This spaceship was indeed very sturdy. Even after such a suicidal crash, it was only slightly damaged. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Flying sounds could be heard. A few who had space survival capabilities and believed that they were faster than the spaceship had already disembarked. They wanted to clear an area for the subsequent heroes to land. Thea was the first to engage in battle with the Holy Sword. An alien with a head like a rhinoceros and a body like a spider was sliced in half by the Holy Sword. Dark green pus and blood splattered everywhere. For Asgard. Only Thor could shout such a slogan and not be afraid of the dirty blood falling into his mouth. Thea wanted to ask him, wasn't Asgard destroyed? Thump, thump. Vigorous footsteps could be heard. A green figure overtook Thea. Hulk was very excited. He smashed a guy with an energy gun with a punch and rushed in without hesitation. The remaining heroes began to use their magic. The little spider swung its spider silk and ran in while muttering. Batman changed into a speed-type armor and was only half a step behind Spider-Man. The mags used their own magic to perform high-speed displacement. For example, Doctor Strange could move hundreds of meters with a wave of his hand. Zatanna and Scarlet, which also had their own magic skills. Green Arrow Oliver activated his armor under the surprised gaze of his new friend, Hawkeye. Flames spurted out from the soles of his feet and he quickly chased after them. Captain America, who represented the free will of the United States, did not have these abilities. He could only run with his 2 legs. Although he was very fast, it was not enough in front of a group of superhumans. Thea looked at the other heroes who were in the same situation as him but did not give up. These were mainly Marvel's heroes. Their DC heroes did not come over. She stretched out her hand and a green light appeared. They began to speed up and cast a Marvel version of group haste. Colonna's minions could not stop them at all. The group of people was like a hot knife through butter. Thea, Diana, Tsingley, Wolverine, Laser Eye, and Hulk alone were the fastest. Some of the rest had the principle of not killing, while others were running for their lives and did not care about fighting. Star Swallowing's internal structure was not complicated. Colonna's modification was limited, so he did not spend much time on it. The group of people quickly arrived at the central area through the passage. Colonna, today is your end. Miss shouted this sentence, which meant that the battle had officially begun. Actually, it was fine if she did not shout, but it sounded more imposing. Originally, this matter was handed over to Captain America to represent the spirit of the main theme and criticize Colonna. Who would have thought that their speed would be slightly faster? At this time, Captain America was still running behind with his long legs. However, Miss felt that she could also represent the main theme. After shouting, she slashed down with her sword. The sword light not only gathered emotions, but also a little bit of the pseudo-phoenix power that she had researched herself. The 2 worlds were merging faster. The only advantage was that she could more or less borrow the divine power of death from the other side. She had little understanding of life. Her pseudo-phoenix power was a mixture of death and emotions. Although it was not as good as the original version, it was more convenient for her to use. This sword represented her best level. After continuous charging, her momentum had accumulated to the peak. Colonna had no time to dodge. His right hand lit up with a golden light, and a thick shield appeared in front of him. The holy sword cut into the shield with an indomitable momentum. The first few centimeters were like tofu, and then the resistance became stronger and stronger. However, Thea did not give up. She increased the strength of her arm and pressed down fiercely. Colonna had no time to dodge. He was also a ruthless person. He let the holy sword cut into his body, and at the same time, he launched a counterattack on his armor. The white arc of electricity was like a giant dragon. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws. It soared into the sky and hit Thea directly. With a hiss, countless energy arcs bombarded her body. Thea only had time to block it with her arm armor. After that, the arm armor and the lining under it were directly vaporized. The powerful electric current hit her body, and a bloody hole as thick as 2 fingers appeared on her arm. Her skin was burned red. Chapter 10:19. The high energy pierced through her armor and arm, vaporizing her blood. Her wound hurt so much that Thea could not even remember the last time she was injured. However, the arrow had already been narked. She could not care less about removing the remaining energy from her wound. She put on a new vambrace and rushed forward. In fact, she was not the only one who was injured. Colonna was also injured. The holy sword cut a 15-centimeter-long gash from his left shoulder to his throat. He still had the Seven Lights beast in his body. Although he was in a sealed state and not in a fused state, emotional attacks did not hurt Colonna much. However, Thea's pseudo-phoenix power, which she created according to her own understanding, made him feel a little uncomfortable. At the end of the day, Colonna was strong enough, but his life essence was no different from those little blue people. The pseudo-phoenix power automatically had some super strong characteristics. If it was forcefully categorized, it could be considered a type of fire ability. However, it was higher than the concept of fire itself. It was the embodiment of the passion of all things. The power of the phoenix gave life to the universe, but it would also destroy life in the end. Colonna's wound was a void. There was no blood at the wound. Unlike Thea's arm, which was penetrated by high temperature, the power of the phoenix eliminated a part of Colonna's body. His wound and the surrounding skin were eliminated as if he was born with a knife. This ability is not bad. New God, you gave me another surprise. How did you do it? Colonna asked with a little joy. Crazy. Sia didn't respond to him at all. On the other side, Xinglei, the heroine she had high hopes for, also rushed forward. She was wearing a very uniform X-Men combat suit with an X symbol on her belt. Xinglei's red hair fluttered, and a pair of fiery red wings could be vaguely seen behind her. Her hands gathered energy with some difficulty, and an almost colorless, translucent shockwave was released. What is this? Colonna had a keen eye. He immediately noticed the dominance of the power of the phoenix. He did not dare to be careless and put up a defensive shield. The invisible energy hit the defensive barrier like a heavy hammer, shaking his body. Not only that, the energy consumption far exceeded the limit of normal calculations. Jean's attacks were very persistent. Seeing that her opponent was not annihilated instantly, a hint of coldness appeared at the corner of her lips. Her unique trait of the dark phoenix gradually manifested. She turned into an energy hub, and the endless power of the phoenix turned into pillars of fire that smashed onto Colonna's head. This woman has some research value. Blue light flashed on Colonna's body as countless amounts of energy were extracted to reinforce the shield. At the same time, the energy of the shield began to circulate faster. His eyes were filled with curiosity. He really wanted to know what was attacking him. The efficiency of the armor was about to exceed 50%. How could an ordinary native woman, who was like an ant in his eyes, be so powerful? Continue, I can still hold on, continue. Jean Grey swept away the fear and trepidation from her past battles. Now, she was in high spirits. The power of the phoenix outside of time, space, and dimension used her body as a medium to continuously strike the barrier. As the energy of the two began to increase crazily, the temperature around them rose rapidly. No matter how pure the energy in Colonna's armor was, it was still processed by him. It was far from being as majestic as the power of the phoenix. Countless amounts of energy were broken down by the power of the phoenix. The molecular structure was broken up and rearranged. Logically speaking, this energy would return to the universe and enter the next energy cycle. But here was the problem. Their battlefield was not in the universe, but inside Star Swallowing's body. The energy seemed to be dissipating in all directions, but Thea felt that not only was a large portion of the energy being absorbed by Colonna, but a small portion was also being absorbed by the battlefield beneath her feet. Looking at the rate at which the energy was being absorbed, it seemed that Star Swallowing would be resurrected soon. Back then, Thea had thought about how to resurrect this guy, but now it seemed that she had thought too simply. Even if Star Swallowing could be resurrected, he might not help. His aura had only leaked out a little, but Thea determined that it was unlikely that the two sides would cooperate. His aura was chaotic and irrational. The only possibility was that he had swallowed Colonna and the heroes. Of course, it was not very likely in practice, but the probability of this guy doing so was as high as 70%. Now, it was even easier. There was no need to swallow them. The heroes and Colonna were in his stomach. He did not even need to shout the slogan "Come to my bowl." He could start digesting them as soon as he woke up. But Colonna had to fight. Thea could only keep an eye on her surroundings during the battle. She was prepared to attack Star Swallowing before he was resurrected. Only she, who was most sensitive to death, could do this mission. Professor X and Martian Hunter, pay attention to this huge monster under our feet. Its energy is overflowing. There is a high chance that he will be resurrected. Thea communicated with the two of them through the telepathic channel. No one expected a disabled old man to participate in such an intense battle. It was touching to participate in the Olympics in a wheelchair, but it would be ridiculous to fight in a wheelchair. However, the old professor did not sit at the back and wait for news. Instead, he came to this space with Dawn Cruiser and provided them with some help. "What do you want us to do?" The Martian Hunter, who had not participated in group activities for a long time, finally left DEO. He and Professor X were left behind to pass on the message. The Martian Hunter's combat power was amazing. Even if the enemy went to the spaceship, he could handle it with his combat power. "If the big guy under our feet wakes up, use your telepathic power to help me stun him. 1 second is enough." This mission was not difficult. No matter how strong Star Swallowing was, with two of the world's most powerful telepathic ability users working together, it was still possible to control him for 1 second. Furthermore, Star Swallowing was always in a hungry state after being resurrected. She was not strong enough. Jean was still attacking Colonna fiercely. Her phoenix power did not weaken at all, but the huge mental burden made her two companions unable to hold on. Laser Eye rubbed his head and leaned against the wall. He looked like he had eaten too much at a buffet. Wolverine was also like an old man in his 70s or 80s. After dawdling for a long time, he still had not killed a single soldier. The two of them looked at each other. "Forget it, let's slack off." With them helping to share the burden of the Phoenix power, Jean became more and more powerful. Seeing that the battle was not too dangerous, Jiao Tianzuan, who was a little crafty, finally made his move. He cancelled his stealth mode, and his expression became more serious. He crossed his arms, and a ball of light blue energy formed a water mirror above them. The mirror quickly changed directions and shot a white light at Colonna. This was a spatial mirror technique, Jiao Tianzuan's unique attack method. The mirror changed directions again, and this time, it shot out a 1-meter-long plasma stream. Chapter 1020. Thea thought for a moment and understood this attack method. In fact, Old Sly did not do much himself. He used the mirror to refract energy attacks from somewhere in the universe. These two bombardments seemed to be at the level of a planet's main cannon. Thea was not sure if it was his own subordinate planet or if it just happened to happen. Jiao Tianzuan's attainments in time and space were very profound. When he was bored, he liked to watch others fight. Perhaps these energy attacks were moved from a battlefield in the timeline. Jean and Jiao Tianzuan both chose to attack from a distance. Thea felt that if she were to throw fireballs, it would be a little inappropriate for her to shoot arrows. She could only bite the bullet and attack. She heard a whooshing sound beside her ear. That very unique and well-known shield flew in front of her eyes and was caught by her in one smooth motion. "My shield will definitely be useful." At this time, Captain America was besieged by 3 aliens. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen, but he still resolutely threw out the shield, just to increase Thea's chances of winning. The young lady did not know whether to laugh or cry. At this level of combat, what use was the shield to her? But Captain America really meant well. She could not refuse, so she could only nod to indicate that she understood. The shield that represented Marvel's theme was held in her hand. To be fair, the shield was of good quality, very light, and had top-notch toughness. Its defensive power was also commendable. Thea also wanted to see if this so-called shield that represented the fate of the plane was so magical. With the shield in her left hand and the holy sword in her right hand, she was very familiar with the combination of sword and shield. After all, Diana's routine was difficult to not be familiar with. Time was tight. She struck a pose and rushed forward. After a few moves, she found a clue. She did not know if it was a psychological effect or the shield really did have a miraculous effect. Every time she raised the shield to parry, there would always be some small accidents. Or the enemy soldiers would be sent flying, blocking Colonna's line of sight. Otherwise, Gao Tianzuan would transfer a very powerful energy attack over, forcing Colonna to defend himself. Another time, something even more ridiculous happened when Star Swallowing began to move her body before her resurrection. It was unknown whether there were blood vessels or something inside her body, but it directly tripped Colonna and caused him to stagger. The attack that was supposed to hit the shield also ended in failure. Thea reckoned that her luck would be very good if she wore this shield. She was quite happy in her heart. She raised her holy sword and slashed at Colonna. Not long after, she saw a good opportunity. Colonna's left leg was cut horizontally. The 2-meter-tall scientist's footsteps were a little unsteady. He was missing a piece of muscle on his calf, and his nerves were also severed. The importance of mobility in combat could not be ignored. He hurriedly extended 2 mechanical arms from the armor and quickly filled in the gaps with various precision parts. As long as he could continue his research and find the truth, replacing some parts of his body with machinery would not be a burden to him. But Thea's threat forced him to divert his attention from Jean. The battle between the 4 of them was a battle to the death from the beginning, and the battle around them became more and more intense as the heroes went all out. The soldiers inside Star Swallowing's body were not just a few hundred, but several races. A conservative estimate was that there were hundreds of thousands of enemies, and it would take more than 2 days for the heroes to finish them off. They could only set up a defensive circle, encircling Thea, the other 2, and Colonna in the innermost layer, while they themselves faced a large number of enemies. With the help of this imaginary protection of America's national luck, Thea constantly attacked the enemy's vital points. If she could not find any openings, she would help cut down the energy shield, not wasting a single second. Colonna was definitely worthy of the title of the pinnacle of technology. The overflowing energy could be recycled and reused. Even the energy used by Thea, Jean, and Gao Tianzuan to attack could be converted into his own energy through an internal cycle. After fighting for 5 minutes, the wild bombardment of the Phoenix power finally made Jean feel a little tired, but she still gritted her teeth and persevered. Thea did some mental calculations, and the result was not optimistic. Even if they attacked with all their might, the best result was that it would take them half an hour to exhaust Colonna's energy. In reality, it was impossible. There were too many variables, and Jean's 2 companions could not hold on for that long. Fortunately, she had a backup plan. She called Scarlet, which overthrew the telepathic channel. "Aim at where Jean's attack will land, and throw chaos magic," she said. The Phoenix power and the chaos power would definitely not complement each other. In essence, they were almost opposite energies. Thea did not need them to mix together. She needed to create a bigger explosion of energy. What better choice than these 2 energies? The first time, Scarlet was slow and missed. Her energy was not as abundant as Jean's, so she had to find the right time. The second time, she barely missed, and the chaos magic was directly destroyed by the Phoenix power. Relying on the core values of the United States to defend, Thea was not under much pressure. She coordinated the overall battle. Not only did she have to fight monsters, but she also had to keep an eye on when Star Swallowing would revive. Now, she had to help with shooting and aiming. Now, release. Scarlet immediately raised her hand and smashed another ball of chaos magic on Colonna's shield. At the moment when the magic and the shield were about to collide, the Phoenix power also caught up. The 2 hostile energies had a romantic encounter outside Colonna's shield. There was no earth-shattering explosion, no fiery smoke, and a fist-sized space was completely wiped out. There was no energy, no matter, and that area was nothing, as if it had never existed. What kind of power is this? Tell me quickly. Tell me quickly. Colonna was very excited. After a long battle, he had already analyzed a small part of the rules of the Phoenix power. According to his calculations, the Phoenix power could also be simulated or even created by scientific means. But now, when the two forces were put together, he was stunned. He vaguely saw a greater realm, but he could not analyze it at all. Two different attributes of the 10th dimension were mixed together. This had already far exceeded the limits of understanding. Even Corona was at a loss as to what to do. Good, it's working, continue. Hey, you guys go first. Thea was cheering loudly when suddenly, the whole battlefield shook slightly. Star Swallowing was about to revive. The explosion just now hurt him the most, and all the aftermath of the energy was actually inside his body. Thea guessed that this god of creation was most likely awakened by the pain. Buzz, a continuous low sound was heard. It was the Martian hunter and Professor X casting psychic shock, but it was very difficult to hold on. Thea did not say anything and quickly found a life node. She put away the holy sword and changed to the night sky sword, aimed at the node and stabbed it. The endless divine power of death eroded Star Swallowing's vitality that had just recovered. The shaking on the battlefield gradually dissipated, and Star Swallowing was killed again. Chapter 1021. Thea wiped the non-existent sweat from her forehead and silently apologized to Star Swallowing. She picked up the holy sword again and charged into the battle. With her help, Scarlet Witch and Jean's cooperation became more and more tacit. Colonna's shield continued to increase its energy, and its power had reached 70%. The cunning old man Jiao Tianzuan saw that victory was in sight and also increased the frequency of his attacks. A high-speed rotating mass of air appeared in his palm, and then the mass of air spiraled toward Colonna. At this time, Diana alone resisted nearly 50% of the enemies on the periphery. Superman and Thor also joined the ranks of the inner circle. One swung his fist and the other raised a sledgehammer. Occasionally, they would mix heat rays and lightning attacks. Each of them was proud of their skills and techniques on Colonna. Batman on the periphery of the battle was not to be outdone. He took the opportunity and fired 3 shock bombs at Colonna. The shock bombs simulated the Flash's high-frequency shock ability and attached themselves to Colonna's shield and began to vibrate violently. Among the heroes, the most eye-catching one was the Hulk. This guy was really not afraid of death. With a whoosh, he jumped over and threw a punch at the Hulk's face. Colonna reversed his energy gun. Only then did Thea realize that this thing could also be used as a stick. He found a very clever angle and, from bottom to top, knocked away Thor and Superman, respectively. After that, he sent Hulk flying with a backhand. Huge energy arcs hit the 3 of them. Superman's expression was the most painful, but he still gritted his teeth and persevered. Electric arcs were more comfortable than kryptonite, right? The Hulk, who was shirtless, was sent flying more than 100 meters away. However, his body was indeed tough. He was like a train. His big feet stomped on the ground, knocking away dozens of small fries along the way, and then he charged back again. Thanks to Thea's knowledge on how to use lightning, Thor's resistance to lightning was the strongest. The 3 of them had a tacit understanding, with him at the front and the other 2 assisting in the attack. In the face of this group of people's fierce attacks, Colonna was also a little unable to hold on. He had no choice but to give up on the energy shield defense of his entire body and change it to defense of some of his key positions. At the same time, he increased the frequency of his attacks. He would rather suffer some minor injuries to reduce the number of enemies. This gave Thea an opportunity. She had been in close combat, trying to find an opportunity. After an explosion between the power of the Phoenix and the power of primal chaos, she found a flaw. Colonna no longer defended passively. He aimed the weapon that looked like a cosmic probe at Tsingley and fired a shot. The power of the Phoenix could also be used for defense. Jean raised her hand to block the attack with some difficulty, while Thea took the opportunity to perform several spatial jumps to avoid Colonna's line of sight. She then stabbed at his defenseless back. At the same time, Superman ignored the lightning curling around the energy gun and grabbed his weapon. His back was completely exposed to Thea's sword. Colonna wanted to shake Superman off, but he couldn't shake him off. He couldn't give up on his weapon either. It was too late to change his move. There was a muffled sound, and with the help of the pseudo-phoenix power, the sacred sword pierced through the armor from his back to his chest. It was a standard penetrating wound. Thea was about to inject more pseudo-phoenix power into Colonna's body to disintegrate his heart when she saw waves of black gas coming out of Colonna's wound. The energy on the surface of the sacred sword was quickly corroded and dissolved. After using the sacred sword for so many years, it was still very sentimental. Furthermore, this guy had obviously modified his heart with some kind of black technology. However, Thea didn't want to let go of this opportunity so easily. She wanted to destroy Colonna's foundation. The sacred sword swayed slightly and soon found its target. "Come out for me." She suddenly pulled out the sacred sword, followed by the Yellow Lantern Parallax Monster and the Green Lantern Cuttlebone. She was most familiar with these two lantern beasts. While the other lantern beasts were still blindly pondering, these two guys had already been pulled out through the passage. The Parallax Monster complained to her about why it was so late. The Cuttlebone also expressed its gratitude. Thea didn't have time to explain in detail. She first put these two into the lantern ring. "Give them back to me, you thief." Colonna was furious, but more than that, he had lost the balance of his emotions. His mind, strength, speed, his overall condition began to deteriorate. His emotions were out of balance, and he could no longer control his anger. His whole person was filled with hostility. Thea didn't have time to blindly ponder about it now. After taking away the two lantern beasts, Colonna looked at her as if she had killed his father. He no longer cared about the attacks of the Phoenix power and the primal chaos power. His energy spear sent Superman and Thor flying. His armor flashed with hot white plasma. His entire body was like a huge mountain, and he stabbed out with his spear as fast as lightning. Thea didn't have time to dodge, nor did she have time to use her half-baked Phoenix power. She decided to exchange injury for injury. Relying on the sharpness of the sacred sword, she cut Colonna's head horizontally. The heart could be replaced with a mechanical one, but the head couldn't be so easily replaced. Both of them were ruthless. Thea's lower abdomen was hit with a bloody hole. Her divine armor was completely destroyed, and the area around the wound was scorched. When she landed, she staggered and spat out a large mouthful of golden blood. Fortunately, Diana supported her. The young lady had never been injured so badly. In order to maintain her combat strength, she completely handed over her own safety to Diana. She closed her eyes slightly and began to use her divine power to clear the remaining energy and repair her body. Colonna took a step back at the critical moment. His attack on Thea was not completely in place, but he still managed to avoid the decapitation. The sacred sword cut a large diagonal wound on Colonna's face from his cheek to his eyebrows. His skin and flesh were torn open, and the wound was so deep that the bone could be seen. One of his left eyes was missing, and blood flowed uncontrollably down his chin. The greatest scientist of Malthus had never been injured like this before, but no one helped him. He could only increase the power of his armor and stabilize the injury. Thea's determination to fight to the death inspired everyone. There were many female heroes present. Jean, who was usually gentle and elegant, increased the absorption of the Phoenix power again. Not far away, Laser Eye and Wolverine couldn't admit defeat. At this time, they gritted their teeth and fought with her. Scarlet Witch was also focused on cooperating with her attack. Gamora of the Guardian of the Galaxy was greatly encouraged. She shouted loudly and waved her two swords like windmills. If the female heroes were so hardworking, the male heroes had no reason to retreat. For Asgard, Thor felt his blood boil again. He gave up all his defenses and his body was covered in lightning. He held the Storm Warhammer with both hands, jumped 5 meters high, and smashed it on the back of Colonna's head. Colonna's mouth and nose were bleeding. He was also stunned. He punched back. Thor followed Thea and fell to the ground with heavy injuries. Clark, catch. Thor threw his hammer to Superman before he fainted. Thea, who had been observing the battlefield outside, also threw Team America's shield to Superman. With a shield in his left hand and a hammer in his right, coupled with a blue battlesuit, a red cape, and a unique face, the Kryptonian captain was officially born. Chapter 1022. The Kryptonian captain was obviously a joke, but Superman saw his comrades fall one after another, and he went all out again. No longer holding back, no longer worried about hurting the innocent, the stellar energy in his body began to operate slowly and steadily. At this time, he had surpassed the single universe level and was moving toward the multiverse level. Superman held the shield and hammer and circled around Colonna, preventing him from getting a chance to attack Jean and Scarlet. He was using 150% of the Kryptonian's ability. However, in this kind of battle, the slightest carelessness could lead to accidents. The third to fall was the Hulk. It was no problem for him to bully ordinary people with his muscles, but under Corona's precise calculations, there were too many flaws. The Hulk's physical defense was still passable, and he was immune to psychic attacks. However, he had zero defense against pure energy attacks. He was thin-skinned and weak, so Superman acted like a gentleman to take care of the two ladies. Naturally, he neglected him. Hulk was kicked in the chest, and if it were not for Little Spider's silk and the Iron Man's help, he would have been sent flying. Even so, he struggled on the ground for a long time and could not stand up. Huff! Huff! On the other side, Thea covered her wound and struggled to stand up with the help of the Holy Sword. She had recovered 50% or 50% of her combat power. She had to stand up because her energy was depleted too quickly. Star Swallowing was about to wake up again. Go! After stabbing Star Swallowing to death again, she was so tired that she sat on the ground to rest, panting. She waved to Diana, indicating that she was fine, and asked her to support Superman. Colonna's injuries were getting worse. In addition to his left eye being blinded, there was a hole in his chest from the back to the front, and he had a concussion from the back of his head. The armor on his right shoulder was also completely damaged. This was done by Gao Tianzuan. The cunning old man had good eyesight and was very accurate in finding the flaws. However, Colonna was no slouch. His armor had some sort of rebounding property. Although the armor was damaged, the rebound made Gao Tianzuan, who had not recovered from his injuries, lie on the ground. There were more and more injured people, and although the enemy was also beaten up badly, this guy was still standing. Jean, you and Scarlet should rest first. Thea replaced the two female generals who had been persevering. They could not be injured. Both of them and herself needed time to recover so that they could accumulate energy for the final attack. Without Jean's bombardment, Laser Eye and Wolverine were finally freed from the predicament of being mascots. The power of the Phoenix circulated between the three of them. Since Jean did not make a move, the power of the Phoenix would be diverted to their side, allowing them to make a move. Wolverine's originally vigorous vitality was supplemented by the power of the Phoenix. At this time, the surging vitality of his body made Colonna look askance. Laser Eye's ability came from an alternate dimension, and he himself was a passage between the alternate dimension and reality. When he used his ability, a certain photonic-like substance had kinetic energy and formed a red energy beam. Now, the power of the Phoenix added emotion to his attack. Under the strong energy attack, even the air was distorted. Colonna had completely given up on scientific research. His energy gun transformed into a shiny long sword. With a wave of his hand, he slashed horizontally. The aftershock of his attack left a deep groove on Team America's shield. Fortunately, at this time, professional shield warrior Diana rushed up. The Valkyrie finally had the chance to shine on this stage. She blocked and parried continuously. Most of Colonna's attacks were blocked by her, and the occasional counterattack shocked her opponent. Diana attacked with all her might. Her shield blocked Colonna's slash, and at the same time, her sword slashed across the side of his neck. Ignorant woman! Colonna was furious. Unknowingly, he took out the lantern beast sealed in his body. It was the Red Lantern Beast Blood Bull. He forced the giant bull that was burning with blood-red flames to merge with him. Not only that, he did not let the other 4 lantern beasts go. Colonna did not care about love and hope. He stepped on the purple lantern beast Marauder and the blue lantern beast Luminous Room Phoenix as his legs. The green light ion shark was the oldest lantern beast and was used as the torso. The red lantern blood bull was the strongest right hand, and the orange lantern python was the most agile left hand. The power of the 5 lantern beasts was forcefully pulled out and merged into his body. At this time, Colonna was like a madman. The overflowing emotional energy made him a little delirious. But at least he remembered that the people in front of him were all enemies. He waved his long sword and slashed at the besiegers in all directions. After only 3 rounds, Iron Man's Odin's blessing armor was destroyed. Fortunately, his old friend Captain America gave him a hand. Otherwise, he would have died. Batman's armor was also destroyed, but he had amazing dodging ability. Other than looking a little embarrassed when he escaped from the armor, he was fine. 2 hacks were defeated, and the price for Colonna was his left hand cut off by Diana and 2 broken ribs by Thor's hammer. But he did not retreat. He replaced all the damaged parts with machinery and waved his energy long sword like a madman. This guy was crazy. Thea was a little speechless. Lantern beasts were not that easy to merge. Sealing them in the body was not a problem, but merging them was another concept. Especially when Colonna did not match the emotions, but chose to play hard. This was even more unwise. The enemy was risking his life. They could not back down. After Thea killed Star Swallowing again, she quietly discussed the strategy with Jean and Scarlet. At the same time, she confirmed the final plan with Captain America, Iron Man, and Batman. Come on. Thea stretched out her left hand to Jean. The other party hesitated for a moment, but still gave her a ball of pure Phoenix power. Jean was not afraid that she would take it for herself. She was afraid that Thea was not the host and the Phoenix power would not recognize her. It turned out that the Phoenix power did not give her any face at all. It did not remember her at all. Fortunately, Thea's strength and realm were enough, and her realm was higher than her strength. It was not a problem for her to control the Phoenix power for a short period of time. Together with Scarlet Witch, she silently counted 3, 2, 1. Thea used the Phoenix power, which covered 1 to 10 dimensions, as the driving force, and then used the methods of the 5th-dimensional people to forcefully modify reality. Scarlet Witch could also modify reality when she was at her peak, but now she was far from it. However, her mutant ability was the probability of modification. Together with the incomplete chaos magic, it could provide a lot of help. Directly erasing Colonna's existence was not possible, at least not with the abilities of the 5th-dimensional people. Thea chose to modify his fusion state. Don't you use the Ion Shark as your main body? I'll pull the Ion Shark out for you. As the oldest lantern beast, the Ion Shark's willpower was the most tenacious, and its resistance was also the most intense. Now that Thea had created an opportunity for it, it naturally would not let it go. It struggled to get out of Colonna's body. Chapter 10:23. Her. As soon as the Ion Shark came out, it saw Diana. It was an old acquaintance. They had worked together in the Dark Knight, the god of Valor. This fitted its criteria very well. The lamp beast, which had lived for hundreds of millions of years, instantly understood Thea's plan. It wagged its tail and merged with Diana with a whoosh. The courage that had been sealed in the other world had returned because of the Ion Shark. Wearing the dark green armor, Diana had reached the peak of her strength at this time. One side was weakened and one side was strengthened. After such a long battle, Colonna was forced to a disadvantage for the first time. This was only the first step. Thea had already arranged for the Atom Man and Ant-Man to hide in the dark. When the Ion Shark left and Colonna's defense was not completely closed, the two guys went in. After all, technological products were not their own abilities. They were complicated to manufacture and had a tight structure. They were very powerful, but it was also easy to destroy, not to mention from the inside. The Atom Man and Ant-Man entered the interior of the Corona armor. To be honest, even the Atom Man couldn't understand the structure inside. It wasn't that he couldn't understand it occasionally, but he couldn't understand it at all. From the design to the concept, from the structure to the principle, he couldn't understand it at all. The knowledge of the corona surpassed modern science by countless years. But this did not stop them from doing damage. Whether it was useful or not, the wires were cut off, the nodes were destroyed, and several energy centers were destroyed. They were very experienced. They destroyed a point on each line so that when the energy passed, the energy would automatically tear these damaged places. In normal state, Colonna would definitely be able to notice their little movements. Unfortunately, the ion shark was pulled away, and his mind was further damaged. The manic energy and emotions began to run wild in his mind. Without the lamp beast to coordinate, his control of his body became weaker and weaker. After all, he was still dead, and had been dead for hundreds of millions of years. No matter how much vitality was injected into his decaying body, there was a limit. Colonna's body essence did not change. The vitality that was sealed in the beginning was decreasing. After a long battle, a lot of blood loss, and the raging emotions were a little overwhelming. My turn. Thea reverse summoned the Atom Man and Ant-Man, and then absorbed a lot of Phoenix power from Jean. She seemed to have a pair of fiery red wings on her back, and a magnificent illusion of a phoenix appeared in her figure. Instead of using the holy sword, she drew a fiery long sword surrounded by irresistible power from the void. Clang! A loud and clear cry sounded. All the heroes heard the phoenix cry that came from the wind. A few people who were familiar with the zither could not help but think that the person who named this power the power of the phoenix most likely heard this cry as well. Thea's speed was raised to the extreme. With her realm, this level of speed could be considered a full burden. She was like Kakashi using his Sharingan. Every second that passed, the power of the phoenix brought her an incomparably heavy burden. Her time was very short. Colonna just realized that there was a problem with his armor at this time. The chaos caused by the departure of the lantern beasts quickly faded because of the almost tangible killing intent. At the moment of life and death, his eyes returned to the state of a scientist, but unfortunately, it was all too late. Thea kept accelerating and crossed the hundreds of meters between the two in an instant. When she saw Colonna's clear and inquiring eyes again, she did not hesitate. Like a spinning crimson arrow, with a crisp cry, she directly pierced through Colonna's chest. The unusually strong armor did not provide much defense. The power of the phoenix pierced a big hole in Colonna's chest. He asked in disbelief, "Me? Am I going to die?" "You are already dead." Diana stood in front of him, raised her eyebrows slightly, swung her black hair, and held the Vulcan's sword tightly with both arms. With a horizontal slash, she cut off Colonna's head. In the end, the chief scientist of Planet Martus did not manage to unravel the secret of creation. With all his regrets, he became a corpse again. Phew! Everyone felt a sense of relief. The bad guy who loomed over two worlds had finally been defeated. The group of heroes were all injured. In the later stages, even a good guy like Professor X had joined the battle. The end of the battle was quite smooth. A few important combatants had no difficulty in dealing with these small fries that came out of nowhere. Thea first collected the remaining 4 lantern beasts. Diana was covered in injuries and also withdrew from the ion shark state. All 7 lantern beasts finally returned. After that, under the advice of Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards, she gave Star Swallowing another slash. A strange feeling filled her heart. This Star Swallowing was killed by her so many times, but she did not give any experience or drop any equipment. Planet Swallowing? Hehe, what a waste of such a famous name. After a simple search inside Star Swallowing's body, Diana found a big book with a black cover. It was indeed very big, at least 2 meters tall. This was the Book of the Dead. Its name was Death. In fact, it had little to do with Thea. This was the Book of the Black Lantern Corps. Just like the Book of Aura for the Green Lantern Corps, the Book of Parallax for the Yellow Lantern Corps, and the Book of Nu for the Green Lantern Corps, it was the Book of the Black Lantern Corps. Its main function was to store life force. Colonna used this book to escape the fate of certain death, and today, 100 million years later, something happened. Sinisto's fangirl, Lisa Draka, was affected by the Book of the Dead. Now, She was wandering around in the book like a two-dimensional creature. Thea thought about it and decided to let her out after they returned. Is the crisis over? Batman looked around and asked. Thea also looked around. Unfortunately, not yet. The two worlds are still in the stage of merging. They had no idea how Kelowna merged the two worlds. This guy's soul was in an incomplete state. In fact, he had been dead for hundreds of millions of years. The underworld couldn't control him, not to mention that the remaining part of his soul was taken away by Marvel. She turned to look at the people in the double couplet. Everyone, time is still tight. The crisis hasn't been completely resolved. We may have to say goodbye here. It's an honor to be able to fight side by side with you. She then turned to look at the Phoenix trio. They were really tired. Jean, let go of a part of your soul. I need to communicate with the power of the Phoenix to separate the two worlds. I need it to help me. The communication went smoothly. Thea nodded and left the spiritual world. The heroes of the two worlds hugged and gave each other their blessings. This was the end of the operation. Can we meet again later? Captain America took back his shield and asked them graciously. Thea chuckled. Once the connection between the two worlds is broken, I'm afraid it will be difficult to meet again. Then I wish you all a safe journey. It's an honor to fight side by side with you. It's an honor for me too. They shook hands happily and said goodbye. The people in the double couplet left on the Dawn cruiser. They took Kelowna's body and directly teleported back to their own world. Chapter 1024. Phew. Home is still the most comfortable. Returning to the original world, the ordinary heroes did not feel anything. Thea had the biggest reaction. She felt as if a huge rock had been lifted off her body, and she was so light that she felt like she was floating. The members of the Righteous Alliance were told to go back and rest. They were all injured, and Thea still had to spend some time separating the two worlds. The divine power of death entered her body again, and the feeling of being filled with energy made her feel comfortable. Although her emotions were not bad, the fluctuating feelings of confusion made her feel uncomfortable. Originally, her level was higher than her combat power. Now that she had mastered the power of the Pseudo-Phoenix and studied the power of chaos, this shortcoming was made up for, and her combat power was slightly higher than her level. There was no flash of golden light above her head, nor was there any world announcement, but she estimated that she was now at the peak of the multiverse. As the Pseudo-Phoenix power entered her body, Thea thought about it and mixed this ability with her eyes. The original Eye of Obliteration needed divine power to power it, but divine power was not needed to power this ability. Now, the Pseudo-Phoenix power was just right. Death and emotions mixed together, and finally, the power of the Eye was raised to the highest level. If Darkseid used the Omega Ray, which represented the power of the end, then the Alpha Ray was the Alpha Ray. Then her ray could be called the Alpha Ray. Death preceded life, and Alpha was the first ray. The ethereal and sacred eyes looked into the distance, past the mountains, across the rivers, across the borders of the universe, and saw the intersection of the two worlds. Two invisible rays, which glowed with emerald light, shot out from the eye sockets. The rays hit the intersection, and at the same time, a red light flashed in Marvel. That was the true power of the Phoenix, and the two forces collided at a certain point. There was no earth-shattering explosion, no earth-shattering change. Ordinary people did not feel it, but with the collision of the two high-end forces, the two worlds began to slowly separate. A giant wearing a tattered dark green robe, who had exceeded the limit of the concept of height, stood out. He was a ghost, and he stood in the void, pulling the DC world towards him. On the other side, a giant that shrouded the entire galaxy also appeared in the Marvel world. It was the head of the universe's 5 great gods, Eternity. He was also pushing his own world. A formless ripple passed through the hearts of all intelligent beings in both worlds. The higher one's level was, the deeper one could feel it. Under the joint efforts of several parties, the two worlds finally broke away from each other and returned to their respective trajectories. Thea was so tired that she sat down on the ground. Other than the Phoenix Force, who was the strongest and still arrogant, the other three were about the same. None of them were relaxed. Who knew how Colonna had managed to merge the two worlds without anyone noticing? Colonna's corpse was easy to deal with. He cut it into 8 pieces and hid them in hell, and heaven. It would be strange if he could be revived. She checked the Endless Family's rankings, and her results were gratifying. She had comprehended the Pseudo-Phoenix's power and was now in 9th place. Second Sister of Death was one step closer to her. Has the world crisis been resolved? Thea would say no. The world crisis was far from over. The Marvel world had returned to normal, but the trouble on their side had only just begun. This trip to Marvel had deepened her understanding of the emotion deity position by several times. Returning to this world, other than the return of the death god, was another sign of disaster. Even without the advantage of being a prophet, she could feel it through her emotion deity position that the universe she was in was very close to death. If there were no remedial measures, the universe would enter a countdown in the next few days. The Seven Lantern Corps had been wantonly squandering the emotion deity position since its birth. This was the universe's disaster. The entire emotion spectrum was about to dry up. If it was not recharged in time, the Big Bang would happen in an instant. There were less than 3 days left. She calculated carefully. Looking through space, Thea saw Kyle Rayner, who was still chatting with the Saint on the Blue Lantern main planet. It was time for this super cheater to take the field. But she couldn't say it directly. She needed Kyle Rayner to be in awe and sacrifice himself to take the 7 Lantern beasts through the Wall of Origin. It might be easier to fool an alien, but Earthlings were all cunning. Once Thea told the truth, the other party would definitely think, why don't you go when it's so dangerous? The greater the power, the greater the responsibility. So part of the truth needed to be told, and this truth couldn't be told by her. It would be best if she distanced herself from this matter as far as possible. Fortunately, the 7 Lantern beasts were now in her hands. No one would know if she did something. Thea left a message in each of the 7 Lantern beast souls, saying that the universe was about to explode due to the exhaustion of the emotion spectrum pool. Then, she sent the 7 Lantern beasts back to the Blue Lantern main planet. Fighting and pushing the world, she was really tired. She used the excuse that she was seriously injured and needed to rest for a few days. She told Diana not to worry, and then she went back to the underworld. At the same time, Kyle Rayner, who was on the Blue Lantern main planet, was chatting with the Saint. The two were really in tune. Their ideals, dreams, and personal values were perfectly compatible. This made Kyle's real girlfriend, Solanik, look at the Saint with a strange gaze. 7 strange lights cut through the sky and entered the Blue Lantern main planet. Thea specially made 7 rings to store these guys. She also briefly described what happened this time. In order to show that she didn't know anything, she left the message in a very casual tone. As the owner, the Saint took the rings. Her Majesty the Goddess was injured in order to take back the Lantern beasts. The Saint received Thea's message and said sadly. Kyle didn't know how to respond to this topic. The Saint was very devout. He really treated Thea as a god. However, as an Earthling, Kyle found it hard to accept this concept. However, he also knew that Thea brought a bunch of people to Marvel to fight Colonna. The lady was afraid that her emotional exhaustion would accelerate, so she used the excuse of guarding this universe as an excuse and didn't bring the 7 lanterns with her. As a bunch of lanterns, this time, they won by doing nothing. They didn't have the right to stand on the side and make sarcastic remarks. However, as a member of the Green Lantern Corps, he had to bring the Green Lantern beasts back. Seeing that the Saint didn't say anything, he reached out and grabbed the ring that represented the Green Lantern beasts. A short message entered his mind. The emotional spectrum pool was about to dry up, and the universe was about to be destroyed. Thea was very smart. She knew that most people would trust the answers they found and would be suspicious of the information that others told them. At least, she was like this. The message left in the Lantern Beasts described the current situation and problems. As for the solution, she didn't mention a single word. Chapter 1025. The sudden message startled Kyle Rayner. He wanted to continue asking, but the mysterious message did not respond to him at all. It was as if the warning just now was an illusion. As for communicating with the ion shark inside, Kyle could do it with his current emotions. However, the ion shark was captured by Kelowna and used by Diana to fight. It had fallen asleep and did not respond to him at all. He asked several times but did not get a response. He was puzzled and let go of the ring. Was it just his imagination? Kyle, who was more emotional, felt that things were not that simple. Seeing that the saint was holding the ring and was about to put the lamp beast back into the main energy source, he stopped his friend. "Didn't you find anything special when you touched the ring just now?" The saint was confused by his question. He thought that there was something wrong with the lamp beast and hurriedly checked it again. The blue lamp beast, luminous room phoenix, was sleeping soundly inside. There was no problem at all. "Raina, my friend, did you find something wrong?" Kyle did not know what to say. He asked awkwardly, "Can you let me touch your lamp beast?" His request could be said to be very abrupt. If he had mentioned it to Athakaitas, the two of them would have fought. Fortunately, the saint's relationship with him was deep enough. Without hesitation, he handed over the ring containing the lantern beast, the brilliant room phoenix, to him. The warning message appeared again, and Kyle's face began to stiffen. He no longer hesitated and touched the rest of the rings. Without exception, there was a message that the universe was about to be destroyed and the emotional spectrum was about to dry up. Kyle did not expect Thea to do this at all. He automatically thought that the lamp beast was warning him. The lamp beast itself was a collection of emotions of intelligent life. Thea's message was hidden in it without anyone knowing. Even if the lamp beast woke up, it would not find any flaws. Instead, it would think that it was some kind of revelation. Kyle Rayner told his friend about his discovery. The saint was skeptical and touched the rings one by one. He did not hear any message. If such a strange thing happened to Batman, he would not stop until he asked 17 or 18 questions. However, the saint had always been mysterious. His thoughts were still stuck in the Middle Ages. He believed very much in things like revelations and prophecies. This matter must be reported to Her Majesty the Goddess. Realizing the seriousness of the matter, he hurriedly took out his light ring and called out. In the end, as expected, the anxious saint received a critical hit from the message: "The number you have dialed is temporarily unavailable." What to do? A serious problem was presented to the two of them. Kyle contacted Earth and made a round of calls. The results were not optimistic. A few of the main participating heroes were currently offline. For example, Thea had gone into seclusion in an alternate dimension, while Diana had returned to Paradise Island to rest. Even the barrier around the island had been raised. Superman had taken a few hits from Kelowna, so he was either recovering in the sun or recuperating in his Fortress of Solitude. Even a few famous and prestigious heroes could not be found. As for Batman, from the Green Lantern Corps down to the current female Green Lantern, Jessica Cruz, none of them had a good impression of him. Moreover, they heard that Batman was an outsider in the Yellow Lantern Corps, so their impression of him was even worse. Kyle Rayner was at his wits' end and felt that he was under a lot of pressure. The Saint suddenly remembered that there were still 2 Guardians on his Blue Lantern planet. In the original spacetime, Sinisto had slaughtered the little blue people. Ganther and Sade had relied on their good relations to survive. The two of them had lived a happy life together in seclusion for a few days. Now, Ganther and Sade had not left, and no one chased them away. They could live in seclusion no matter where they went. Odin was known as the most beautiful planet in the universe. After some discussion, the two decided to stay on Blue Lantern Planet. It was sad that the 2 founders of the Corps had been forgotten. Fortunately, the Saint remembered them at the last moment. The place where the 2 Guardians lived was a little far away. The Saint and Kyle flew for a while before they found it. There was no time to reminisce. The Saint went straight to the point and asked his question. Emotion spectrum pool? Ganther was a little dazed when he heard this term. He felt that he might know, but the memory was too distant and there were too many things. Reality and illusion were mixed together, and he wasn't sure if he knew it or not. What about Her Majesty the Goddess? She should be able to handle this, right? No matter how much trouble the little blue people caused, the lady would be able to handle it. It had been like this for a while. I'll cause trouble, you'll deal with it. Even Ganther was used to this way of doing things. The first thing he thought of was Thea. At the mention of the goddess he respected, the saint almost cried. Her Majesty's injuries are too severe. She's now in a deep sleep. Ganther was shocked. Dead? That can't be, right? Even Kyle was shocked. Was it that serious? When they contacted Earth, although they did not say much, it did not seem like a tragic victory. However, when he thought of how a few of the main heroes were severely injured, he did not have the right to refute this. Heroes shed their blood for the safety of the universe. As a hero, he would not laugh at them. Now that danger was coming again, he vaguely felt that it was time for him to step forward and contribute. Who could injure her? Was it Darkseid? Ganther knew the lady's strength. He could not imagine who could beat her into a deep sleep. The saint and Kyle looked at each other. The saint then said with a strange expression, "It was Colonna." Ganther almost thought that he had misheard. How many years had it been since Colonna died? It was only when the saint roughly explained the incident that he realized that he could not live in seclusion. His former colleague almost caused the universe to explode. How could he not know about such a big thing? He did not feel the joy of Kyle and the rest winning. He only felt that he was lucky to survive this time. He had a feeling when Thea separated the worlds, but he did not expect things to be so serious. He knew Colonna's strength very well. Even when they were not guardians and were still the ancient martyrs people of the universe, Colonna was already one of the best in the race. After they shrunk, they could still work together to seal the first lamp. However, when they were at their peak, they could only banish Colonna. The difference in strength between the same race was huge. The little blue men were not all of the same generation. It was just that they had a long lifespan and did not care about such things. For example, Haruba, whose memory Thea read several times, was Colonna's student. Sade was also Ganth's student. Ganther was one of the few people of the same generation as Colonna. In the race, his talent was mediocre and could not be considered outstanding. Colonna was a great scientist when he was young. He was basically the type of child that the elders talked about. After that, he represented the peak of the ancient martyrs people. Chapter 10:26. Unfortunately, everything had turned out to be a lie. The smart one was dead, and the mediocre one was still alive. Thea had gathered a group of heroes to hack Colonna to death. Then, she was heavily injured, and a group of heroes were heavily injured. To Ganther, this was only natural. It was refreshing to see her alive and kicking. According to Kyle's description, he also touched all the rings, but he didn't find anything. Kyle Rayner, why do these revelations only work on you? Do you know why? Ganther asked. The Green Lantern ring on Kyle's hand was made by Ganther for him. He was naturally kind to Ganther, so he did not hesitate to tell him his guess. Because I have 7 emotions. He briefly explained how Thea had trained him. I see. The goddess trained you to be a White Lantern reserve. Ganther pondered for a moment. The crisis this time is very serious. I need to return to Aurura's main planet to look up some historical information. In my memory, someone should have mentioned the emotion spectrum pool. In fact, he had already recalled that this pool was what Colonna had said. However, his colleagues at the time had scoffed at it. There was a pool for emotions. Ganther left the Holy Walker to watch over the lantern beasts. Before he left, Ganther specifically told Moji that no one could take away the lantern beasts this time. Knowing that he had made a mistake last time, the baby planet hurriedly agreed. Unlike the 8 First Lantern Guardians, Ganther had lived on Aurura's main planet for hundreds of millions of years. The defensive facilities here were useless to him. Leaving Kyle Rayner outside to wait, he walked directly into the meeting room of the Little Blue Men. Ganther, Sade, and the 8 First Lantern Guardians, the number of Little Blue Men Guardians had once again exceeded 2 digits. However, the friendship between them was as thin as paper. There was no joy of meeting someone from the same hometown. I remember that you've already left the Green Lantern Corps. The long-bearded guardian seemed to have established a leadership position among these people. Naturally, he did not want anyone to share his power. Another crisis is coming to the universe. Which one of you can lead this matter? Ganther ignored them. He had to rely on himself for everything. He began to look through Aura's historical records. In the vast amount of information, he wanted to find the conclusion of Colonna's research on the emotion spectrum. What is the core of emotional energy? Soon, he found a notebook. It was a long paragraph of words, but unfortunately, there was nothing in it. Colonna himself had not figured out what emotions were. Gantz flipped through it and crossed it out. He picked up another experiment record. If the green light is used too much, it might cause another kind of relative emotion to grow in the universe. Colonna analyzed that it would be fear. The more the Green Lantern Corps used green lanterns, the more fear there would be in the universe. It was like two sides of a scale. When one side was pressed down, the other side would naturally rise. Colonna's analysis was very methodical, but unfortunately, no one cared about his opinion back then. Now that the yellow lamp had been around for so many years, it was too late to say anything. Ganther made another cross. He pulled up another document. It was a draft written by Colonna before he was exiled. Emotions are physical objects. They have form and substance. They are a kind of resource that is not limitless for people to use. The words at the end were a little blurred. Colonna was probably not very sure, at least not at the time. Before Kyle came to him today, Ganther was skeptical of this statement. But now, not only did he have Kyle's inexplicable revelation, but Colonna's research also proved that the emotion spectrum pool did exist. He shared his findings with his former colleagues. Impossible. Is there a place in the universe that we haven't set foot in? I don't believe in the existence of an emotion pool. And this pool is about to explode because it lacks emotions. Ridiculous. I don't believe it. The long-bearded guardian shook his head vigorously to show his disapproval. The remaining 7 had their own opinions. For a moment, it was as noisy as a market. Gantzer was equally confused. He had repeatedly asked Kyle about the location of the pool. Unfortunately, Kyle didn't know either. The female guardian, Sade, was more attentive. She carefully recalled for a long time and did have some results. She whispered to Ganther, "Could it be behind that wall? That's the only place we haven't explored." Wall? Initially, Ganther didn't understand, but after that, it was as though a bolt of lightning had struck his mind. The memories that had been sealed away for a long time started to resurface. He remembered that he and Corona had once observed the Wall of Origin together. At that time, they were the oldest race in the universe. They were young and had astonishing strength. However, even Corona, whose knowledge surpassed the ancients and the contemporaries, had to lower his head before the Wall of Origin. That wasn't something that science could analyze. For the first time in his life, Ganther saw shock and confusion on Corona's face. It was also from then on that Colonna's research became more and more deviant and crazy until he created the cosmic probe, observed the hand of creation, and formed the multiverse. All of this originated from the Wall of Origin. Gantz's intuition told him that the Wall of Origin, the Lantern Beasts, and Colonna must have some connection. Unfortunately, Colonna's head was chopped off by Diana, and his soul turned into ashes. There was no way to ask even if he wanted to. After thinking about it from beginning to end, he said to his former colleagues, "The Wall of Origin. The emotional spectrum pool must be behind it." The long-bearded guardian looked at him with some mockery. "You're crazy. 3 of our most outstanding colleagues sacrificed themselves on that wall. Have you forgotten? Kyle Rayner is different. Why did the 7 Lantern Beasts only call him? Because he will become a White Lantern. Because the 7 Lantern Beasts need his power to return to the emotional spectrum pool." The Guardians were still a little skeptical and joined in the search of Colonna's records. As more and more evidence showed that the greatest scientist of their race was certain that there was such a pool when he was alive. As for where the pool was, it was up to them to interpret it. After all, his research on emotions was just a side project. The secret of creation was his main research topic. Regardless of how many crazy things Colonna had done, the Guardians recognized and respected his scientific research. Such a mad scientist would not lie in his research records. They even thought deeper. After all, they were not the ones taking the risk, so there was no loss in trying. Without alerting the many Green Lanterns, they took Kyle to an uninhabited galaxy. "Raina, let's see how the White Lantern was born," Ganther said. Kyle was a little nervous. The 7 lantern beasts' rings were next to him. The Saint, who had been guarding the rings and worried about his friend, also came over. He took a deep breath. The few of them did not make it clear, but listening to the meaning behind their words, he knew that this matter was extremely dangerous. But now, only he could do it. Only he could wear the White Lantern. Chapter 10:27. Fusing the 7 emotions into White Lanterns was the first step, finding the pool was the second step, and filling it up again was the third step. Needless to say, it would be very dangerous. A year ago, Kyle was still an artist. He never thought that he would be able to save the universe. The pressure was great, but the honor was even greater. He was only scratching the surface when it came to emotion control. Thea could release it externally, buff it on weapons, and even add it to spells, but Kyle could not do that. He could only add it mechanically according to the training method. With the green light as the foundation, blue light, yellow light, green light, orange light, purple light, and finally red light. The 7-colored light appeared on Kyle's body one by one. The first 3 were easy, but when it came to the 4th and 5th, it was a little difficult. The last 2 were extracted with gritted teeth. The 7 lights beasts were awakened by this unique aura, and each of them poked their heads out of their rings to take a look. After that, they seemed to have understood something and revealed themselves one after another. They hovered in the air and quietly looked at Kyle, communicating with each other silently. Next, Kyle's emotions exploded to the extreme. When the 7 emotions were forcefully fused together, the ion shark looked at the world again. There was reluctance and fate, and it rushed into Kyle's body first. Following closely behind was the Blue Lantern's Room Phoenix, the Yellow Lantern's Parallax, the Green Lantern's Cuttlebone, the Orange Lantern's Desire Python, the Purple Lantern's Plunderer, and the Red Lantern's Bloodball. Returning to the emotional spectrum was their mission since the day they were born. Even the oldest ion shark with the longest lifespan could not refuse. With the buff of the 7 lantern beasts, Kyle's emotions, which were originally as weak as a small flame, began to boil. The fire burned fiercely, and the hot emotions began to burn. "Reno, my friend." The Saint was shocked. He wanted to save his friend. "Wait a little longer." Ganther grabbed him. Torchbearer? Is he the torchbearer mentioned in the prophecy of the Book of Aurora? From the looks of it, this fellow lantern has extraordinary potential. Maybe he can really save the world. A few of the first lantern guards whispered to each other. The burst of emotional energy from Kyle made their hearts palpitate. The flames continued to burn, but as time passed, a glimmer of light slowly seeped out from the flames. At first, it was very faint, and if one didn't look carefully, it would be almost impossible to see. Later, it became more and more obvious, and in the end, it was dazzling. A dazzling white light seemed to illuminate the entire universe as the second white lamp was born. Even though he had taken many shortcuts, he still had the holy mission of being a martyr. With the help of the 7 lights, Kyle Rayner shone with the brightest light of his life. All the light ring users in the universe felt this light. Even though the lighting was different from place to place, with some being day and some being night, they all felt it from the depths of their hearts. What a hack! The young mistress, who was playing dead in the underworld, was slightly disdainful. She pursed her lips. She had painstakingly planned for so many years, only to have someone catch up to her in just a few days. How terrible was that feeling? However, considering that he had used his life to save the universe, Kyle Rayner was fully deserving of the title of Torchbearer. She was still pretending to be dead and did not provide any help. Although the process was a little complicated, Kyle still became the white light. After reciting the oath, he put on a white battle suit. Kyle slowly opened his eyes. His eyes, which were originally filled with artistic aura, were now filled with heavy exhaustion. Several emotions were conflicting and entangled with each other, causing him to feel anger and pity at times. He only felt that his head was about to explode. Even though the 7 lights tried to restrain it, it was still extremely difficult for a normal person like him to take in 7 different emotions. However, after fusing with the 7 lights, he also understood his mission. It was the 7 lights' mission, and at the same time, it was also his. Where is the wall of origin? I need to get there immediately. He turned around and asked Ganther. How do you know about the wall of origin? Are you Rayna's colleague? The long-bearded guardian asked curiously. When they were talking earlier, Kyle had been waiting outside. He should not know this term. Kyle pointed at his head. The 7 lights told me about it. Their mission is there. I know very well that the universe is in danger now. Time is really running out. The guardians looked at each other and quickly came to an agreement. Together with Ganther, the 10 little blue men teleported together. After a few jumps, they arrived at the border of the universe, the wall of origin that trapped countless strong people. It was the first time Kyle Rayner and the Saint saw the eternal magnificence of the wall of origin. It still shocked them. The wall filled their entire field of vision. It was boundless and extended to the end of their vision. No one knew what was behind the wall. It seemed to be even older than the universe, even longer. What are those things on the wall? Kyle naturally saw countless figures on the wall. They were of different shapes and sizes. There were giants dozens of meters tall, giant beasts as huge as the stars, and strange life forms that he could not name. They looked very lively. Their expressions, and movements were like the perfect works of an artist. However, Kyle, who was carrying the white light, still felt countless powerful pressure from them. He had a guess in his heart. Those are all invincible strong people who are trying to explore the secrets behind the wall. Our colleagues are also up there. That was a long, long time ago, the long-bearded guardian said, pointing somewhere. Kyle looked in the direction he was pointing. He did see 3 little blue men, but they had merged with the wall. Their faces still had the horror of the moment before they were killed by the wall. We've arrived at the wall of origin. Kyle, what are you going to do next? Ganther was the strongest. He also provided the most power for the teleportation. He was a little out of breath at this time. Kyle looked at the creatures on the wall again. These strong people were all stuck without exception. Was he stronger than them? There was a trace of regret in his heart. He was not a god or a strong person. He was just an unqualified lantern warrior. Was there anything special about him? He clenched his fists and struggled in his heart. Maybe he was not the main character at all. If he ran into the wall now, would he also become a part of it? He came here too hastily. Should he wait for Thea to come back and ask for her opinion? Countless thoughts entangled with each other. Countless ideas appeared in his heart. Some wanted to show the spirit of heroism and fearlessly rush in. Some wanted to be more cautious and think carefully. Some wanted to go back and ask for the opinions of others. Am I just an ordinary person after all? Looking directly at his heart, he laughed self-deprecatingly and made a difficult decision. I want to go in. This is my mission. Chapter 1028. It wasn't easy for Kyle Rayner to make this decision. There were only a few people who could face death with equanimity. Modern people had complicated minds. People who could do things with certain beliefs and face death calmly were very rare. He didn't know if he had a future. In his understanding, he would crash into the wall and become one with it. The lantern beasts would enter automatically. This should be the rest of the process. The universe would be saved, and he would stay on the wall forever, maintaining his last posture before his death. At least I can choose when I die. Kyle Rayner patted his cheeks lightly to make his facial muscles not so stiff. When those who came later saw his body, they would at least know that he was smiling as he met his death. Kyle Rayner kept cheering himself on. He took 2 deep breaths without turning his head. Saint, you are my best friend. Don't stop me. This is my mission. Also, tell Solanik that I will always love her. After dissuading the saint who was ready to die with him, Kyle looked at the wall of origin. Would this be his end? He felt that it was most likely. He was just an ordinary person from Earth. An ordinary artist could be hung together with these strong people for future generations to admire. This was also a benefit, right? He felt that his thoughts were getting more and more scattered. He shook his head and got rid of all the distracting thoughts. Even if he died, he would die with honor. He raised his speed to the highest. Facing the wall of origin, he rushed up without hesitation like a stream of light. The distance of thousands of meters was covered in an instant. Under the gaze of several people, Kyle Rayner rushed into the wall of origin head-on. The expected scene of him being stripped of his life and turned into a relief didn't happen. The entire wall was unobstructed as if it didn't exist. He rushed straight in. This is. The long-bearded guardian was shocked. He had been away from the normal world for too long. He couldn't be sure if what was happening in front of him was reasonable. Sed also looked at Ganther. Ganther was the most knowledgeable and oldest guardian present. As someone who was in the same era as Kelowna, he should have enough knowledge to explain the current situation. But she was disappointed. Ganther also couldn't figure out why Kyle was fine. Instead, he rushed in as if he didn't see the wall. What was the obstruction of this wall? What about the legendary power that would stick to all intelligent life? Lord Ganther, what about Kyle? The saint asked sadly. Let's wait here. Kyle will be fine. That was all Ganther could say. In reality, the scene in front of him had exceeded his expectations. He did not know whether this was good or bad, so he could only wait. Time continued to pass. 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. An entire day passed, and Kyle Rayner still hadn't appeared. The good news that he had expected didn't come. Instead, there was quite a bit of bad news. As the lantern ring core that had been used for the longest time and had the longest history, Green Lantern's rings finally went offline due to the exhaustion of the universe's emotions. Hal Jordan was fighting criminals on Earth. He did not expect the light ring to suddenly lose power and fall from the sky. If Superman did not save his life, he would have to report to the underworld again. 1 minute after the Earth's light ring went offline, the green light main energy source of Aurора's main planet also stopped operating. Heretics and rebels, fear my divine light. The green light shines forever, the light of eternity. The oath was still ringing in his ears, but unfortunately, the green light had been completely extinguished. Immediately after, Yellow Lantern was the second to go offline, followed by Purple Lantern, Blue Lantern, and Red Lantern. The saint looked at the faint blue light on his ring that was like a candle in the wind. He felt uneasy. He did not know if his friend was safe now. He did not know if he could still fly in the sky with the lantern ring. He did not know if there was still hope in this world. Your Majesty the Goddess, please guide me and help me reconfirm the faith in my heart. The saint hid in a corner and began to pray in a low voice under Ganth's speechless gaze. Young Mistress was still in the stage of pretending to be dead. She certainly would not jump out and say anything comforting. However, she did not give up on the saint as a pure fan. She vaguely transmitted a thought, which was roughly, everything will be fine. The pure fan saint was overjoyed. For a moment, his heart was filled with a sense of responsibility. Her Majesty the Goddess was still alive. There was still hope in the world. He no longer worried about the future. He had to do something within his power. Blue Lantern was the last to set up. Plus, their lantern ring's energy source was 150%, not 100% of the normal lantern ring. There was still some energy left at this time. The saint gathered everyone from Blue Lantern and went to other galaxies to rescue the lanterns who were in desperate situations because their lantern rings went offline. Other than Blue Lantern, Orange Lantern Lafreyes also had some energy left. After all, the upper limit of his ring was 100,000%. A starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Plus, with his greedy nature, Lafreyes' ring was always full of energy. According to the ratio, his ring still had 300 to 400% of energy left. However, the sudden disappearance of energy scared him. He was alone and could not find anyone to discuss it with. He could only find a place to wait for death while trembling. Miraculously, Thea could also hear him calling out to her. Young mistress did not know whether to laugh or cry. This dog-headed guy actually had a certain level of faith in her. Although he was not as devout as the saint, he was still at the level of a normal believer. New gods did not need faith, but she could hear him calling out to her. Similar to the saint, Thea was afraid that this guy would scare himself to death. She also transmitted a message similar to "Don't worry, it's not a big deal." His subordinates basically did not rely on lantern rings anymore. The sudden loss of power did not affect them much. The yellow lanterns and blue lanterns stayed in their own territories. They did not need to fight monsters here and there. Other than a few unlucky ones, there were almost no losses. The remaining red lanterns and purple lanterns were more or less holed up in their own planets. Other than some worry about the future, there were no major casualties. The green lanterns were once again hit hard. Those who were lucky were on the main planet. Even if they did not have any racial abilities, as long as they were still breathing, they could be saved by OUA's advanced technology. Those who were less lucky were still acting as space police and fighting against space criminals when their lantern rings suddenly lost power. They could only pray for their own good. The unluckiest ones who were passing through a black hole or had their lantern rings suddenly disconnected while they were in space died a meaningless death. Originally, after experiencing the Night of Darkness and the incident with the Third Army, the Green Lantern Corps numbers were not enough. Now that they were facing a disaster, their numbers dropped sharply again. Even with the Saints' rescue, more than 500 of them died, and the same number of Green Lanterns went missing. What happened? Did someone attack OUA? Did the Guardians have any instructions? Faced with the rescued Green Lanterns, the Saint could only use his catchphrase to fool them. Everything would be fine. He did not know whether others believed it or not, but at least he believed it. Chapter 1029. Thea had been paying attention to the development of the incident. Although Kyle Rayner had been following the original space-time trajectory this time, there was a probability problem. He had a high chance of saving the world, but there was also a chance of failure. Thea had reserved a teleportation method for several of her relatives. Once the universe exploded and restarted, her relatives and friends could be teleported to her small world to temporarily settle down. Even if things went south, she could save Earth. As for those aliens, she had to say sorry. Unfortunately, the wall of origin blocked her view. Even the anti-surveillance tower that she had snatched back with the antimatter universe could not spy on the inside. She could only wait silently for the final result. Another day passed, and it was only a few hours away from the reboot of the entire universe that she had predicted. Ordinary people were still living their lives day after day, unaware of the impending disaster. The light of the blue and orange lamps finally disappeared. The Seven Lantern Corps that had once dominated the universe seemed to have become history. As for whether the universe would come to an end because of this, no one knew. Why did it take so long? What was Kyle Rayner doing behind the wall? Thea was also a little anxious. She expected Kyle to rush in and throw the lantern beasts into the pools, and then happily come out with the life equation. How perfect! Why did it take so long? Fortunately, everything was within the control of fate. When there were only 30 minutes left, a white light that was much dimmer than when it went in flew out from behind the wall. A group of guardians rushed to save people. Some called Rayner's colleagues, and some called the torchbearers. It was a noisy mess. Seeing this scene, Thea finally breathed a sigh of relief. She carefully sensed that the lantern rings of the entire universe had finally come back online. This meant that the emotional spectrum had returned to normal. The Seven Lantern Beasts had turned into the purest emotions and recharged the emotional spectrum pool with energy. And Kyle Rayner's white lantern ring also had something inexplicable in it. It was the life equation. Thea smiled slightly. As long as the equation left the wall of origin, it would be easy to deal with. However, now was not the right time to make a move. After all, the banner of justice had to be raised high. Her gaze crossed the layers of world walls and looked in the direction of the new creation planet. Although she had mentally prepared herself, the development of things did not exceed her expectations. When she saw the life equation, The Heavenly Father of the new creation planet also saw it. Following the rise of Thea and the fall of the anti-life equation into Darkseid's hands, the pressure on the Heavenly Father increased by the day. The Heavenly Father was still tall and big, but the wisdom in his eyes had faded a little, replaced by urgency and a trace of greed. However, as the leader of the righteous faction, he couldn't just rush up and snatch it by force. He had to take care of his subordinates' emotions and deal with all aspects of relationships. The Heavenly Father's gaze first fell on the underworld. Sia's strength was already higher than the Heavenly Father's. She had long entered a state of feigning death before his gaze landed on her. She lay there quietly like a sleeping beauty. The Heavenly Father then looked at the Revelation planet. Darkseid had already extracted more than half of the anti-life equation. The dark and obscure energy cloud hovered above the Revelation planet, causing the demon army to attack even more ferociously. However, Darkseid was desperately defending. With the other great demons not making a move, the Heavenly Father had a good chance of winning. The Heavenly Father didn't take a peek at heaven. The archangels of heaven were no match for him individually, but if they attacked together, the Heavenly Father wouldn't be able to defeat them. Furthermore, he didn't want to experience the power of the Lord of Heaven, Michael. Thea was seriously injured and unconscious, Darkseid and his Hell clones were weak, and the Heavenly Father's attitude was unclear. However, they had always been aloof. In theory, they wouldn't fight with the Heavenly Father for the life equation. Furthermore, the balance of the universe could only be maintained if Darkseid had the anti-life equation and the Heavenly Father had the life equation. The Heavenly Father almost hypnotized himself to find excuses. However, he couldn't snatch the life equation like Darkseid did. Even when dealing with a mortal like Kyle Rayner, he had to be careful. This was especially so considering that Diana was acquainted with Kyle Rayner. As the leader of justice, how would Diana feel if he openly snatched the life equation from her? Even the Heavenly Father was impressed by the Valkyrie's persistence in justice and her peerless charisma. Diana had a good relationship with the commanders under his command. If the Heavenly Father didn't want everyone to betray him, he had to be very careful. However, the life equation's allure made him lose his cool completely. The moment selfishness appeared, it would grow like wild grass. The Heavenly Father's state of mind was shattered. He subconsciously felt that he shouldn't have taken this step, but the pressure of reality made him make a choice in the end. The commanders were powerful, but they all had their own principles of justice. The Heavenly Father didn't intend for them to interfere in this matter. After some thought, he summoned his adopted son, Olian. This second son of Darkseid had always been raised by the Heavenly Father as his own son. Olian was also willing to die for the Heavenly Father. "Father, you called for me?" It didn't take long for Olian to arrive at the Heavenly Father's bedroom. "My son, there's something I need you to do for me. Your orders are my duty. I will obey any of your orders unconditionally. Just tell me who the enemy is," Olian said passionately. "I need you to go to this universe and find this young man. Bring him back to the new planet of creation. He has the ultimate weapon that can end the war between good and evil." The Heavenly Father's words were vague. Olian looked at Kyle Rayner on the screen. He was a rather handsome young man whom he didn't recognize. However, this young man didn't seem like an evil person. He didn't seem to have anything to do with the space monsters or galactic criminals that he was supposed to fight. However, an order was an order. He still took out his mother box and received the target's coordinates. He was stunned. The coordinates were very familiar. "Father, this universe is. It's the universe where the goddess of death and Diana are. They both came from there." Olian was completely confused. Since there were people on his side, was it appropriate to ask him to go there? It was best for a new god not to go to the birthplace of another new god. The natives worshipped the new gods as true gods. Why would a new god suddenly go there? This was an unspoken rule among the new gods. It wasn't just the new planet of creation of the righteous faction. Even the evil faction's apocalypse planet was the same. Unless there was a fight, they wouldn't easily set foot in another's universe. "My son, do you believe in my justice?" The Heavenly Father didn't answer his question. I have always believed in it. I have never wavered. Olian's answer was firm. This was what he really thought. Trust me. I can only leave this matter to you. Bring my personal guards and choose the most loyal soldiers. Use the fastest speed to bring him back to the new planet of creation. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,